All right. Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We're actually starting on time for once. We're literally like right at the top of the hour. So this episode, we're going to be talking about GPUs a lot because I think that's the main tech-related news that has been all the rage throughout this week. Mostly going to be talking about Intel, but we will also talk about stuff that we can expect to see in the first quarter of next year, namely the new upcoming RTX 50 series. So that is Nvidia's Blackwell consumer-grade GPUs, as well as AMD's RDNA 4 for their, I don't know what it's actually going to be called. It might be called 8000 series, but who knows what it's actually going to be called. But that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about. So not a whole lot in the other PC component space. I know that we're coming off the tail end of a whole bunch of new motherboards and CPUs that have launched in Q4, namely the AMD Zen 5 CPUs, the new 9800X3D Intel Core Ultra CPUs, as well as the laptops too. We didn't really spend too much time talking about the laptops, but Apple's new M4 chip is out, so the new MacBook is out. Those are actually very impressive. And then the AMD Strix Point, those are now starting to show up in larger quantities. And there's the Qualcomm stuff, which we talked about earlier this year. Those are still available. Those are actually starting to see some good discounts now. So if you're shopping around for a laptop that's low power and long battery life, the Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite, Snapdragon X, or Elite X, those are pretty good. And then AMD Strix Point, so that's the Ryzen AI HX 370. Those, along with an Nvidia RTX 40 series discrete GPU in the laptop, those are actually probably the most highest performing laptops currently. So I just want to touch on that. So I guess the main thing, as you guys can see here, Intel Arc. So this kind of was a rumor, and then people were talking about it coming out next year. And then I was saying a few months ago that the window of opportunity for Intel to launch these would be Q4 of 2024. And lo and behold, December 13th, the B580 has been announced officially. So next week, the B580 will be launching, and then a couple of weeks after that into January, mid-January, the Intel Arc B570 is launching, starting at $219. And the B580 is starting at $249. So I expect, looking at the lineup here, we can see the Intel Reference Limited Edition in the middle here, and then you have all the board partner cards. So they're slowly ramping up. So it's kind of like a grassroots movement. So we're seeing Onyx has joined, Maxon has joined. They have ASRock, Acer, Sparkle. Those are returning from last time. So this is going to be an interesting product launch. If you're somebody who is playing games at 1080p, like if you're still on a 1080p monitor for whatever reason, it's hard to call yourself a tech enthusiast if you're on a 1080p monitor, to be honest, but I'm not going to judge. But if you're on a 1080p monitor, these graphics cards look like they're going to be a decent choice for the money. $250 for 1080p gaming seems like it's going to be a pretty good deal. At least on paper. And if anything to go by based off of Intel's marketing, as of course Tom Peterson has been out and about with various interviews with tech media sites. So he's kind of like evangelizing the world for the Intel Arc story, and that is the case here. But I think that for 1080p, these are probably going to be pretty decent. The Intel saying that the ray tracing performance in this is vastly improved. They're claiming that the RT performance is superior to Nvidia and AMD in this price point. So we'll look at some of the news articles on it, but so far I'm curious, what do my viewers here think about the Intel Arc B580 and B570? So I'm curious to know what you guys think about these, because we haven't really talked about Intel's GPUs in a while. There hasn't really been much to discuss, but now the Battlemage is finally showing up as a discrete graphics card. It was released as a mobile integrated graphics chip. Now we're actually seeing it as a discrete card. Hey, Ark, do you think it's a choice? Zero interest? Well, I mean, if you're using a 4K monitor, these are probably not for you. Well, I'll put it that way. These definitely are not for people who are on a 4K monitor. If you're playing games at 4K resolution, this is definitely not meant for you. These are a little low spec for most of your viewers. Yeah, I think a lot of my viewers are the tech enthusiast crowd, and these don't really appeal to them. This is kind of like an interesting. It's interesting to talk about, to look at least, because to be honest, there isn't really a whole lot of market disruption at the low end of the market. When you think about it, when we think of low end or entry level, we think of what? The RTX 4060 and the Radeon RX 7600. Those are the two graphics cards that come to mind. And I guess maybe the previous, like the Intel A750 and A770, maybe those are the sort of cards. These, you know what's interesting? Intel is claiming, let's see if we can find Intel slides here. Intel is claiming, I don't know if this news article from WCCF Tech has the chart here. They did some comparison data. They've published some actual like comparisons with Alchemist. Oh, here we go. So this chart, for some reason, they went and did. Why is this not loading? Anyway, they went and did 24%. They're saying 24% on average faster than an Intel Arc A750. So they're saying it's 24% faster at 1440p. These results are at 1440p ultra settings. And they're showing, like Dragon's Dogma 2, for instance, the A750 does 41 frames per second in Dragon's Dogma 2. And the new B580 is doing 48 frames. That is like the worst case scenario. And if you guys saw the stream where we tested the Intel Arc, both Battlemage on Intel Core, well actually no, Intel Core Ultra is on Alchemist. Never mind. Well, when we tested the A770 earlier this year, back in the spring, and then we also tested the integrated graphics recently on the Intel Core Ultra CPU, if you guys saw that, I think the most hilarious part of that stream was the Dragon's Dogma 2 performance, because they had an occlusion culling problem in the driver with that specific game, and I don't know if Battlemage fixes that. So that'll be something that I'm wanting to reinvestigate, because Alchemist ran Dragon's Dogma like complete garbage, and they're showing that as the worst case scenario. But they're saying 48 frames per second at 1440p in Dragon's Dogma 2 on the B580. So I don't know if they fixed that problem. There were some very serious problems with that game with the Intel graphics card that were completely non-existent with AMD or Nvidia cards. So that is definitely... It's funny, it's like the worst performing title. That's like the first one on my list of the games that I actually want to test. And then obviously the esports games up here, like Dota and League of Legends, these aren't even like really okay. They're gonna show those esports results. I guess it's like, yeah, if you're playing the esports games, if all you do is play esports games, these GPUs are probably gonna be fine for 1440p or 1080p. But I don't think you really need to upgrade your graphics card if all you do is play esports games. So, you know, not really a strong selling point there. 100% faster than nothing is still nothing. Well, 100% faster. Well, who said 100% faster? Because they're claiming 24% faster. So, but you can see though, like the funny thing is the fact that they're showing this against an A750. The reason why they're doing this is because the A750 and this graphics card have the same price point. They're both the $250 price. So if the B580 is 24% faster than the A750, that means that it's also faster than the A770. So this new card completely invalidates the Intel Arc A770. Like, no one should even consider that card if they want to get an Intel GPU. At this point, all you're going to do is you're going to wait for a B580, and you're just going to get this. Now, the fact that the thing that's a little concerning to me, though, is the fact that they're launching the B580 first instead of like a B780 or a B770, because the B500 is their mid-range product, and the B700 is their high-end product. So if they're doing limited edition of the B580, that raises some eyebrows. That kind of indicates to me that we aren't going to see the higher end, like a B780 or a B770. We're not going to see those GPUs anytime soon. So it looks like, and I think there was some rumors, we were talking about this last week, on the last episode of Tech Thursdays, there were rumors that the big Battlemage hasn't even, or it's just now taped out. So don't expect to see a higher end Intel GPU until probably the summer of next year, is when I would expect to see something like that be announced. So probably around Computex next year, we may see a higher end Intel be announced. So it's pretty much going to be the B580 for a while. For a good 6 months, there will literally only just be this, and then nothing else from Intel from the GPU side. So we can talk about the performance metrics, where these line up. This is kind of like these numbers basically put this around an RX 6700 to an RX 6700 XT. And if you're talking Nvidia, this is kind of like a 3070 Ti. Not 3070 Ti. 3070 is what I meant to say. It's kind of like a 3070 or 3060. 3060 Ti to 3070, depending on the title, is going to be somewhere in that range. But it will have better RT performance than those 30 series Nvidia cards or the AMD RDNA 2 cards. The only problem for Intel is I don't think the ray tracing performance is something that people who are looking to buy a $250 graphics card are really enthusiastic about. I don't think people that are gaming at 1080p and they're maybe 1440p and they want something really cheap, they're probably not playing the type of games that utilize RT where it actually matters, if that makes sense. I think they're mostly going to be playing games like League of Legends, Apex Legends, a lot of esports stuff, because Intel's definitely trying to go big on the esports stuff here. Not so much these other games. Now, they are providing some pretty decent numbers. So Hogwarts Legacy with XESS upscaling to 1440 is doing like 90, is that 90? Yeah, 95 frames per second. So that is pretty good. What that means is this is probably a 1080p graphics card. The reason why, and Tom Peterson has been very clear on this, the reason why they're showing 1440p, and they also do this, they're basically doing 1440p because they're seeing a higher percentage uplift at the higher resolution. And the main reason why they do this is because when they compare it to Nvidia, so here it is against the Nvidia RTX 4060. Now, what's interesting here is they compare it to the Nvidia 4060. They don't compare it to the 7600. But the 7600 in rasterization is actually faster, but it's a few percentage points faster than the 4060. And it's also cheaper than the 4060. So if Intel compares to Nvidia's 4060, they're saying, okay, it's 10% faster at 1440p. And what is this? This is relative performance. So this is where they baseline the 4060. Okay, the 4060 is this line in the middle. And then the ones that win, when the Intel wins, they're above it. And when they lose, they're below it. So they do lose in some of the games against the 4060. But they're claiming 10% faster than the 4060, which means this is probably like 6 to 7% faster than the 7600. But the thing is, the 7600 is really cheap. So, but this card has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and the 7600 only has 8. Now, as soon as you try to say, oh, well, there's the 7600 XT, which has 16 gigabytes. Yes, that's true, but that card is also going to be more expensive than the Intel graphics card. That card typically is like $310 to $330, depending on the SKU. So it's more expensive by at least $40, $50. So that's a harder sell because essentially you're paying like $50 more for the AMD, but you're getting 16 gigs of VRAM versus 12 on the Intel. So it kind of goes back and forth, but yeah, I think that's probably the card that this one would be most objectively compared to from a value standpoint. They were testing with XESS performance upscaling, except for games without XESS, and only in F1 did they use quality. Okay. So it's basically 1080p then. This is basically a 1080p GPU. Which is fine, because that's kind of where I think of the 4060 as a 1080p graphics card, and I think of the 7600 as a 1080p graphics card. So this is basically going to compete against those cards. And, I mean, that's fine. We are going to see next year, they'll probably refresh the lower half of the stack from Nvidia and AMD, but we won't see that until later in the year. So we're not going to see a 5060 until, like, I don't know, May, June, July, somewhere in there. It's not going to be for a while. So this will be doing battle with the 4060 and the 7600 and maybe the 7600 XT for the foreseeable future. So yeah, overall though, let me see. Did they test Final Fantasy at all? Final Fantasy Endwalker. Okay, Endwalker, not Dawn Trail. Endwalker. That's the old one. They're claiming 141 frames per second in Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, which was a 2021 game. That's the older one. The newer one's a bit harder to run, but still, that's still a high enough margin, so it's probably going to run that game fine. That game doesn't have any RT, but it does actually lose to Nvidia in League of Legends and Dota 2 and Counter-Strike 2 and Starfield, who cares? Gears 5, and it's basically losing in some of the esports titles. Now, it's not losing by a lot, but that is kind of bad that it's actually losing in some of the titles that they really were saying that it's really a strong performer in. So, yeah, the other thing too, I guess the last thing I'll say about the B580 in the comparison to the 4060, they compare specifically 1440p Ultra. The reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to kneecap the 4060 because they know the 4060 only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And some of these games, these newer titles, when you're running the game at Ultra with the high textures, they use more than 8 gigs of VRAM. Oleg just subbed to the channel. Thanks for the sub. Welcome to the channel. So, by testing at 1440p, they basically kneecap the 4060. So again, I wonder how this would do. Well, I don't know. I think 7600 has 8 gigs of VRAM. 4060 has 8 gigs of VRAM. Both of them are around 300 or less. So those are the proper cards. Although I do kind of think that Intel's advantage against Nvidia is it's kind of like they're kneecapping the Nvidia, which is hilarious. The value proposition, though, it's a decent value when compared to Nvidia. Now, compared to AMD, I think it's going to be a little bit of a harder sell. However, I do think that the main things that save Intel here and ultimately make the B580 become the best value in the sub $300 price point are the fact that Intel not only has Intel brought a 12 gigabyte graphics card to the market at $250, they have also finally achieved feature parity with AMD and Nvidia because they are now gaining the long needed frame gen feature that Nvidia and AMD have had for a long time now, for like a year or more now, compared to where Intel was at this time a few months ago. So now they're getting frame gen, and that is really, really good news because a card like this is the sort of GPU that if you want a game at 1440p on these newer titles, yes, it has 12 gigs of VRAM, so yes, it can handle 1440p rasterization titles. The problem is it's most likely going to need frame gen after a year, or maybe even less than a year, in terms of being able to run these newer games. Like down here, we see all these games here at the lower half of this stack that are like sub 60. All these games here are below 60 frames per second on the new V580. And that means that with frame gen, these games that have these kind of frame rates can get doubled frame rate, which means that they can perform more like the games over here, which is actually a good thing. So definitely frame gen, it's not going away, it's here to stay. Intel's finally caught up, they got frame gen now, and I think that's going to give this GPU a lot more longevity in the market, and it won't become irrelevant instantly once Nvidia and AMD launch their new 60 class equivalent cards. So that's pretty much it. Let me see what else they got here. Unlock the latest features in modern GPUs. So here, okay, I like this slide. This is a good slide because they're showing it compared to a Nvidia GeForce GTX, not RTX, GTX 1060. So they are claiming that this new Intel card compared to a 1060 is 180% faster in rasterization, and it is I don't know what this bar chart indicates, but it is like infinitely better than a 1060 in ray tracing. That is hilarious. It is infinitely better than a GTX 1060 in ray tracing, because the GTX 1060 can't even do ray tracing. The Nvidia GTX 1660 Super, this card is also significantly worse than the Intel B580. The ironic thing is that it's clear that they're targeting people who are still on these really old, non-RTX capable graphics cards. But the problem is those graphics cards are from, so the Nvidia 1060 is from the year 2016. It is from July 2016. That means that next summer, that graphics card will be 9 years old. 9 years old. So they are comparing their brand new Battlemage to an 8.5-year-old graphics card. And they're saying that it's infinitely better in ray tracing compared to a 2016 graphics card. I don't know how to look. I mean, it doesn't matter how you try to spin that. Most people don't care because most people are like, well, they don't even know how old the 1060 is. They just probably have a 1060 from some kind of pre-build. So it's interesting seeing this chart. This is probably the most entertaining chart on here. And then they've got this other one, best in class performance per dollar. Wow. Okay, so they're saying that wait, okay. So, okay. Finally, they're actually showing an AMD card here. Okay, so for rasterization, they're showing the RTX 4060 is $300. And that's the baseline, because that's the weakest card out of the three. Then we have the RX 7600, which is 6% faster, and it is cheaper than the 4060. It is $270. So it's like, what? That's like $30 cheaper. Then they have the new Battlemage, which is coming in at 32% faster than the RTX 4060, and it is $50 cheaper than the RTX 4060. But then here's where they seal the deal. Here's where they get people to completely move away from Nvidia and only look at the Intel GPU. The ray tracing performance. regardless of whether the fact that ray tracing, whether or not ray tracing actually matters at this price point, but they are saying that it is 25% faster than the RTX 4060 in ray tracing performance. So I guess the final sales pitch from Intel is, hey, $250, you're getting 25% better RT versus the competition. And you're paying $50 less, and you're getting 30% more VRAM for future proofing, and we now have frame gen. You're getting the whole package. So now you can turn on frame gen and max out RT and max out the games at 1440p with upscaling. That's what this is. So this graphics card requires upscaling, frame gen, in order to do ray tracing at playable frame rates at 1440p. But it has 12 gigs of VRAM, so you can actually crank the graphics up to ultra. You can't do ultra on a 4060 because it runs out of VRAM when you turn it up to ultra. So yeah, that's pretty good actually. That's pretty good. Battlemage is great for people on a low budget that want most of the shiny stuff at 1080p. Yeah, well, yeah. 1080p, it'll probably be fine in most games without any sort of upscaling. But 1440p is most likely going to need upscaling, especially if you start using ray tracing. Is 850 watts enough to handle 4060? That's way more than enough for those graphics cards. Okay, we will always be one gen behind because we're now going into the RTX. Yeah, but we aren't going to see those new GPUs for a while. But this card, the Intel B580, will compete with these two cards from the competition for a good 6 months or more. Just you wait and see. You're not going to see a 5060 at least until the halfway point next year. Intel needs a miracle to come up with current generation performance. Well, this is the current generation performance. Actually, no, they're exceeding the current generation performance. 32%, and it's $50 less. See, the rasterization slide is actually the most impressive one. As far as I'm concerned, they're doing 32%. We'll call this plus or minus. We're saying this is 30% better than the current offerings, and it's cheaper than both of them. That's good. And it has more VRAM than both of them. That makes it even better. So I'm just thinking of it realistically. If I was going to build a 1080p gaming computer, and if I had to pick between these three graphics cards, I would choose the Intel graphics card. That's simple. I would go 9800X3D plus B580 for a budget gaming PC. If I wanted to save even more money, I would get a 7800X3D with a B580. And that would be that. That's the easiest way to go. So that's pretty good. So yeah, this is pretty good. And then they've got more board partners now. So last time they had Acer, ASRock, and Sparkle. Now they have added 3 more. Gunir, Maxsun, and Onyx are now being added to the list. So they've got 3. They've doubled up the number of AIB partners. So that is actually really interesting. If AMD is not going high end, we will likely get RX 8600.
Part 1. I bought X870 Steel Legend and F56400J3239F48GX2TR5S. Saw review where 32GB at 6400 was possible on this MOBO.
It is. But what do you mean 32 gigabyte? 32 gigabyte one stick or 32 gigabytes 2 sticks? So are you talking about 2x16 or are you talking about 2x32? You're saying at least 96 gigabytes, 6000. Yeah, that's easy. That's easy. You can do 9,000. So you can do on the Steel Legend, you can do 4 times 24. So that's 4 sticks, and the total will be 96 gigabytes. You can do that at 6,000. You could also do 2 sticks, so you could do 2 times 48 at 6,000. That'll work also. You can even do 2 times 48 at 6,400. That'll also work on the Steel Legend. And then the 32, I'm not sure what you mean by the 32 gigabyte. Is that a single stick, or is that a total? You didn't specify there. It's like 32 GB at 64. Is that like a total amount at 64, or is that like one stick? So meaning, what I'm asking, are you referring to 64 gigabytes, so 2 times 32, or are you referring to 32 gigabytes total, which means 2 times 16? In any case, in all of those cases, you can do all of those different configurations that I just listed. You can do all of that at 6,000 on a Steel Legend. So that will work. Meaning you can do 4 sticks at 6,000. You can do 2 sticks at 6,400. You can do 2 sticks at 6,000. You can do the higher density sticks at 6,000. The dual rank sticks at 6,000 or 6,400. So yeah, all of that will work fine on the Steel Legend. Just make sure the RAM that you want to get, or the RAM that you have there, I assume that that's probably on the...
No good MOBO exists that is all white. I use one SSD. CPU is 9950 by 3D. Please comment, suggest on 48 by 2 RAM. Part picker link in comment.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do 2 times 48. So if you mean 96 gigabytes at 6,000, meaning you have 2 times 48, yeah, you can do that. That'll work totally fine on an X870 Steel Legend. You mentioned the white motherboards. So there are a few. We talked about them, I think, 3 weeks ago. So there is the Steel Legend. There is the Gigabyte Aorus Pro Ice. And there is also the Asus Strix. I believe it's the Dash A or the Dash F. One of the Strix motherboards from Asus is also white. So, but yeah, those are going to be your main options. The main thing, if you want a white motherboard that has a postcode debug, the only one that's going to give you that is going to be the Gigabyte one. If you get a Gigabyte Pro Ice, that is a white motherboard that also has the postcode debug. But yeah, I appreciate the super chat. I hope that answers the question, but basically here, what I'll do... Let's bring up Paint real quick so I can list all the options that will work. Here, where is Paint? Oh, there it is. So you can do... So X870 Steel Legend supports... You can do 2x48 at 6,000 or at 6,400. Both will work. You can do 4x24 at 6,000. That will also work. You can do 2x32. That is a total of 64 gigabytes at 6,000 or at 6,400. So all of these combinations will work on that motherboard. It'll also work on all the other white motherboards too. So does that answer the question? I've tested all of these, so I can tell you all of this will work. Now, I did not test the newest Steel Legend. I have the older Steel Legend. But the older Steel Legend is the same thing. It's the same Promontory 21. It's the same memory controller on the CPU. So what works on the old Steel Legend will work on the new one. It'll probably even be easier to run on the newer one. But yeah. But yeah, that is... All of these combinations work on this motherboard. So 4 times 24, that's a total of 96. So these first two, this is 96, this is 96, this is 64. All of these will work on that motherboard. In fact, so if you saw the video I did earlier this year, or like a few months ago, I think it was back in like August or maybe July, I did do a video. There's actually a few videos featuring the ASRock Steel Legend. and those are showing 4 sticks of memory. In fact, that video is showcasing this. The latest video is also showcasing this, but that is for a gigabyte motherboard. But I did do a similar video featuring an ASRock motherboard earlier this year for memory overclocking. We did 8,000 and we did the 4 sticks. And then also, like at the very beginning of the year, we did dual rank, which is not easy to do. I don't recommend it because it has, first of all, if you're trying to do, so if you're doing like 128, which would be 4 times 32, or if you're doing 192, which is 4 times 48, these are insanely dense amounts of memory for a consumer desktop, especially when you're trying to run them at high speed, like, for example, 5600 to 6000. So these can be done at 6000. It is not easy. The memory training time takes a very long time. So I don't really recommend the dual rank 4 sticks unless you are okay settling for a speed in this range. So like, for instance, 4800 to 5600. This is the range that you can expect to run with 24/7 stability with these sort of memory sizes. Now, if you're lucky or if you're willing to manually tune the on-die termination values, you can actually get 6000, as I showed in my video. You can actually get these to run stable. The only challenge with these, particularly the 192 at 6000, as shown in my video, it's going to be very dependent on your motherboard. What works for me in that one video that I did showing this, that is specific to a Gigabyte Aorus Master. And you can't just copy paste my settings on an ASRock motherboard or an Asus motherboard or an MSI motherboard or even a different Gigabyte motherboard for that matter and expect it to work, because every single motherboard has slightly different, well, not slightly different, every motherboard has a different wire trace layout. And that wire trace layout will dictate how well or how fast you can get this kind of RAM working at a stable frequency, unless you have, you know, something like CUDIMM, which currently doesn't actually exist in these sort of capacities, nor does it really exist at these lower speeds. But potentially that is where we could see some improvement, although I don't know, only time will tell in terms of what sort of advantages the CUDIMM or CUDIMM will provide. I think that's mostly going to help higher speed as opposed to higher density. So I don't think CUDIMM will make much of a difference on higher density, because higher density, there's a lot of, it's just a lot of memory modules. And that's it. Everything is just spread out so much, so it's much, much harder on the memory controller. So that's why I don't really recommend this unless you really, unless you have some very specific use case. Let me make one thing clear. Anyone who just wants to play games on their computer, they should definitely not be trying to do 128 or 192 gigabytes. This is not for gamers. This is for people who need to use their computer for some sort of productivity use case, or they're running some kind of virtualized application, or maybe multiple instances of various virtual applications, and we're talking virtual machines at this point. But I don't think that the consumer desktops are the right solution for virtual machines. I think something like Threadripper is definitely going to be more well suited for that situation, and Threadripper doesn't have a problem running 192 or even 256 gigabytes at 6400, just to put things into perspective. It is significantly easier to run higher speed RAM on Threadripper, provided that you have RDIMM, compared to regular Ryzen or regular Intel, because Threadripper is quad channel memory, not dual channel memory. So 4 sticks on Threadripper is equal to only 2 sticks on Ryzen. 4 sticks on Ryzen is equal to 8 sticks on Threadripper. So that is why Threadripper, it's like, oh, you want to run 4 sticks of memory on Threadripper? Oh, that's easy, man. That's like running 2 sticks on Ryzen. We can crank that up to 8,000 if we wanted on all 4 sticks. So that's why if someone's really, really strongly considering a whole lot of memory, I strongly suggest you consider maybe like an entry-level Threadripper. Because as someone who has done a lot of testing with memory, especially if you want to do high speed and high capacity, Threadripper is way better than Ryzen for that sort of use case. Plus, it gets the quad channel. Plus, you get more core density. So, like VMs, you can scale it up like way more than you can on a traditional desktop. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question. I know this wasn't really in the original question, but if you want to do any of these, those work fine. In fact, I'll add another one. Let's remove these. I'll add one more. If you want to do 64 gigabyte across 4 times 16 at 6,000, that'll also work. So for those of you that really like the look of 4 sticks of RAM, I personally suggest 96 gigs because at least that's giving you more than 64. Running like 4 sticks with a total of 64 is kind of feels bad because it feels like there's not much upgradability there. But I think if somebody wanted to max out a Ryzen system for the remaining lifespan of the AM5 socket, I think you can literally sit at 96 gigs for the next like 3-4 years and you'll be totally fine. You're not going to be running out of RAM anytime soon. Yes, it's RDIMM. ECC, it's registered DIMM on Threadripper. So yes, you need a different type of memory. Okay, so and we might actually see Threadripper 9000 come out next year as well. There's rumors about that too. But yeah, my go-to choice is if I want 4 sticks, I'm doing this. If I want 2 sticks, I mean, that's okay, but I'd probably go this, to be honest. But anyway, that's just me. For most people, if you're on a 9800X3D, 9800X3D equals 8 cores, which implies 32 gigabyte RAM minimum. 4 times 8 equals 32 gigabytes, meaning the rule of thumb from Adobe and other applications. And remember, what I'm talking about is productivity. I'm not talking about gaming. I'm talking about productivity. But you can apply the same logic to building a computer for gaming, and it's totally fine. So number of cores times 4 equals the ideal minimum RAM for a given CPU. This is the mathematical formula to build a balanced computer. So hence, 9800X3D, 8 cores, multiplied by 4 gigs of RAM per core, that equals 32 gigabytes of RAM. You can go any higher than that, it's totally fine. But starting would be 32. Ideal would be, like if you want high speed, recommended high speed is 48 gigabyte at 8,000. This is what I personally use, and it's great. And it's fast. And it's low power at idle. So this is kind of like the new happy medium. That's like the enthusiast target right there. This is the enthusiast target. This is the ideal enthusiast stuff. Otherwise, you can do your, free RAM from Micro Center, 32 gigabyte, 6,000. That's fine. That's hitting the minimum. So, that's fine. But 48, if you want to go fast, 48 is the ideal choice. If you want to go a lot of RAM, you would do 64 gigs of RAM. Or maybe, yes, okay, yeah, that's a good point. 2x24. Yes. Yep. The stick may come with a lower profile at 6,000 as well, and it's... Yeah, that'll work fine. 6400 XMP. Yeah, I mean, I'm running XMP right now. Like, all my high-performance RAM is XMP RAM, and I'm using all of that in my AMD computer. What about the timing numbers? Like, I went over that last week. You take the number, try to, like, ideal ratio is 200. 8,000 divided... So basically, let's give an example. DDR5 8000, CL40. What's the ratio? 8,000 divided by the CL, which would be 40, equals 200. There's the ideal number. So let's do another one. DDR5 6000, CL30. 6,000 divided by 30 equals 200. Magic number. 200 is the magic ratio. So if I do 8 by 40, 200. Magic number. 6,000 divided by 30, magic number. So anything above 200 is complete overkill. Anything under 200 is fine as long as it's like 100, as long as it's like above 180. So let's do another example. Let's do like another very, very popular one. DDR5 6400 CL32. This is 6400 divided by 32 equals, you guessed it, 200. Math checks out. Perfect. 200 ideal ratio maintained. So those are 3 examples right there. So, okay. I hope that answered the question. 24 gigabyte. Yeah, you're right. It is going to be expensive, though. The best choice the best recommended RAM that I have found currently is the G-Skill. And it's in the link. It's in the description of this live stream, by the way. G-Skill Trident Z5 Neo. So this is an Expo memory kit. This is DDR5 6400 2x48. Or no, 2x24. So this is a total of 48 gigabytes at 6400. This RAM is $175. So if you want 4 sticks of memory, you buy this twice, and now you got 4 sticks of RAM. And now you're running 96 gigs of RAM. So this is the cheapest, best way to go RGB and 4 sticks maxed out. I am probably going to end up getting these kits next year. Now, I don't have any money to buy computer parts anymore because you guys know, like, we've done so many live stream builds. I can't spend any more money on computer hardware. So, but the super chats will help for next year, definitely.
What are some really good specific products for RAM cooling solutions? Maybe copper heatsink, and an 80mm fan and or a 3D printed air scoop that uses my case fan's airflow.
So, one of the easiest ways is Corsair used to sell this RAM cooling kit. It was basically like a kit that sticks over the memory DIMMs on the motherboard, and it had, I think, 1 fan or 2 fans that blow air directly on the memory. Basically, all you really need is active cooling on the RAM. You don't need water cooling. You don't need any sort of like fancy thing like that, or any sort of heat transfer or heat exchanger. All you really need is a fan blowing air in close proximity to the memory itself. So, interestingly enough, the Gigabyte, the X870E Aorus Master, and the X870 Aorus Extreme AI Top, these motherboards from Gigabyte include a very nice RAM cooler. They come with this fan that you can attach to a motherboard standoff on the case, and you can angle that fan down over the memory, and you can cool the RAM using the cooler that comes with these Gigabyte motherboards. However, I don't even know if you really need that. I mean, you can, if you have a case that allows you to put a fan inside the case and you can angle it toward your memory sticks, that would be ideal. The nice thing about air coolers, like the big Noctua NHD15, those, because they have the big fans on them, those fans, especially the middle fan, can be pressed down enough so that it actually pulls hot air off of the memory sticks. So that kind of gives you what I call auxiliary air cooling to the memory, but it's very subtle. If you need higher end cooling for your memory, you're going to need something like what comes with the Aorus Master or the Aorus Extreme AI top, or you're going to need some kind of custom fan kit that is designed for cooling the memory. So something like, I think Corsair used to sell something like that. I don't know what other brands have the more modern ones, but I know that Corsair used to have one. I don't know if it's current anymore, if they still make it. But what are you trying to do with the RAM, though? Like, specifically, what are you trying to do with the RAM? Like, are you trying to overclock it to, like, some ridiculous speed? Like, you're going for, like, 8600, 9600? Because you shouldn't really need RAM cooling unless you're running your RAM above 1.4 volts. If you're running RAM at 1.45 volts, you definitely need active cooling for the memory. Because once RAM gets above like 55 degrees Celsius, stability becomes a problem. He's trying to overclock it, but to what though? Like, what sort of voltages you're running on the RAM? If you're overclocking the RAM and you're only pushing voltage at like 1.4 volts, you don't really need active cooling. Unless your RAM doesn't have good heat spreaders on it. You're trying to squeeze out the best performance. Low timings, 8,000 if I can, if not 6,000. 6,000 won't need any, you won't need any airflow for 6,000. Even if you're doing like CL36 or CL38. 8,000 CL38 is probably, 8,000 CL38 is probably going to need a fan. Yeah. So if you're, but again, what sort of temperatures are you seeing on the memory? If your memory is not exceeding 55 degrees Celsius, then I don't really think you need to put any fan. RAM can go higher. There are motherboard BIOSes that allow for higher voltages, like 1.45. Also, if the XMP or Expo kit can push 1.45 into the SPD profile, it can go up that high. Unless you're doing 1.45 volts, you shouldn't need any sort of active cooling. Remember, the timings are going to be dependent on the binning of the memory as well as the voltage. So if you're trying to run really tight timings, the only time you're going to need a fan is if you're running high voltage. Just because you're running tight timings doesn't mean you need a fan unless you're having to crank the voltage up really high. And I'm talking 1.45 volts before you actually need a fan. 1.4 volts doesn't need a fan. SK Hynix chips don't run that hot until you're going 1.45. That's why 1.43 was the limit for a long time. You haven't done overclocking and testing yet, just want to have it done. 1.43, I would probably put a fan on there. The best thing I can tell you is to get either... So you can either get the Corsair kit for RAM cooling or any of the ones that are similar to that one. Basically, the way what it looks like is... So you have the memory sticks. So you got your memory sticks. And then you have like the actual, like this is the top, this is the bottom, like on the motherboard, the clips. What the memory cooler looks like is it basically goes on top of that. So it'll clip on up here, and it'll go over this, and there'll be fans on it. Typically like 2 or 3, probably 2 fans. Some of them have like one big fan, but the Corsair one had one large fan. I think some of the others that I've seen have had like 2 fans on them. So it'll be like this. And they'll be blowing air down on the memory. That's how it looks. So something like this, it'll have like a 3 or 4 pin fan cable header that you'll attach to the motherboard. That's typically how they work. I think some of them, the older ones, also have like a SATA power connector, just in case you don't have like a 3 pin or 4 pin header. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't allow links, so I don't see any of the links that you posted. I don't even get a chance to see them. Like YouTube automatically just removes them, or I never even see them. So it's as if you never posted them. But if you're in the channel Discord, I can check them out there after the stream. But this is what it would look like though. A RAM cooler. It would go over the memory sticks. Yeah, YouTube blocks links automatically. But something like this, guys. I mean, the Aorus Master includes a fan that's designed for memory cooling. Okay. Yeah, we'll look at that offline. So yeah, but basically for those that are curious, I mean, this is a good question because I think a lot of people don't really think too much about memory overclocking or especially cooling for memory. But yeah, if you're trying to push the timings down for lower latency and better performance, and you're also trying to run the memory at a very high speed, realistically, from my experience overclocking RAM, I'll tell you guys what I like to do. It's very, very easy. I like to run the RAM at 8,000, so 48 gigs at 8,000, and I turn TREFI. I set TREFI to like 49,920. This number has never let me down. Sometimes, okay, I know that the max on this is like 65 something. It's like some 65 whatever number. 65,000 something is like the maximum value for TREFI. But I do 49,920 because this number, maybe 50,000, but this number has never showed instability issues. And this drops the latency close enough to like the max number to the point where I don't care. Because if I'm doing 49,920 on TREFI, I mean, I'm doing this, get this, guys, I'm doing 8,000 with that sort of TREFI. And you know what the voltage is? 1.35 volts. 1.35 volts. I don't need any sort of RAM cooling for this because it's such low voltage, and the TREFI is so reliable that sleep cycles work. So the problem with 65,000 is sometimes you put the computer to sleep and you wake it up, and the computer either takes a very long time to wake up or it doesn't wake up. And that's the reason why I don't do max TREFI, because I use standby on my computer, which is suspend to RAM. So I need the memory to like be able to handle very, very low power while it's asleep. And that's the reason why I've found 49,920 is like the magic secret number where you can still run your memory at 1.35 volts and you're still running it at 8,000 and it all works. And it's 100% stable. It can pass mem tests for 24 hours. It can pass Y cruncher. Like, this is the reason why I do this, because this is more, call this a conservative overclock, but this is something that I know works for a computer that I need to be running reliably. I cannot afford this computer to be running unstable. It has to be 100% rock solid stable, and these secret settings work. So I'm not going to deviate from what I know works. But yeah, and if you're trying to overclock to the max and you want to do like active cooling on the memory like this, then yeah, definitely you can check that out and see how far you can get with that. See, I don't know about running the heat sinks on the memory. If the RAM already comes with good heat spreaders, I don't think you need to change the memory heat sinks itself. I think really all you need to do is something like this and just leave the memories in like default heat spreaders as is. Like, active cooling is going to outperform any sort of random heatsink that's attached to the memory if you're doing memory overclocking. Yes. You could do the same kit that... You could. You could, but 8,000's better than 7,200. You know why? You know why? Because of F clock. F clock equals 2,000 megahertz. U clock equals 2,000 megahertz. M clock equals 4,000 megahertz. This scenario is for DDR5 8,000. When you run the RAM at DDR5 7200, F clock is still 2,000. It's not going anywhere unless you want to run it slower for less performance. Your U clock is equal to 1,800 megahertz, and M clock equals 3,600 megahertz. So the reason why I'll never recommend 7,200 is because when you run the memory at 7,200, these two are mismatched, latency penalty, and these two are mismatched, latency penalty. Double latency penalty at 7,200. This is the reason why nobody ever recommends 7,200 on these systems. It's always either 6,000 or 8,000, because when we run at 8,000, U clock and F clock are both 2 gigahertz, which means they synchronize together. They are in lockstep with each other, which means you get a latency reduction. Performance benefit. So we're going to do a check mark there. But these are mismatched. However, the memory is running twice as fast. It's double the speed of the U clock. So it basically carries the heavy burden. It's basically Frodo, the ring bearer, carry the heavy burden on the memory. You shift the pressure to the RAM so that the memory controller relaxes and is just sitting there like, yeah, this is awesome. This is awesome. I only got to run at 2 gigahertz and we get the best performance. And we get a latency benefit because now I'm synchronized at the same speed as the U clock and the F clock. So this is the reason why 8,000 is the ideal choice for the enthusiasts. Lower latency versus 7,200, which is terrible. Terrible latency. Unless you want to run your F clock at 1,800, you want to slow it down by like 200 megahertz and drop it to 1,800. But I don't think anybody really wants to do that. So, you know, this is just straight up bad. So, yeah. That's why 7,200 is never really recommended. 6,000 is also better than 7,200. 6,000 is better than 7,200. Yes, you heard that right. 6,000 is faster than 7,200. Because, again, F clock equals 2,000 megahertz. U clock equals 3,000 megahertz. And M clock equals 3,000 megahertz. Which means now we shift the ring bearer becomes the memory controller. The memory controller holds all the spiritual pressure. All the heavy lifting now immediately drops on the memory controller. When we're running the RAM at 8,000, the heavy burden is on the RAM itself, running at 4 gigahertz. But when we're running at 6,000, we get these two are async, so you get latency penalty there, but these two are sync, so you get latency reduction there. So you get a win and a loss. Here, we get a win and a loss. Here, we get a loss and a loss. You get 2 negatives. So this one is good. So anyway, guys, that is the reason why on this channel we'll only really ever advocate for either 6,000 or 8,000. And it's gotten to the point where I basically, like, if I'm doing 2 sticks, I'm doing 8,000. If I'm doing 4 sticks, I'm doing 6,000. It's that simple. We do 2 sticks of DDR5 at 8, and we do 4 sticks of DDR5 at 6. It's that simple. I mean, you can do 6400 if you want. I mean, it's not guaranteed for everyone. So that's why I don't talk about it. See, I tend to prefer things that I refer to something, I refer to this concept of set it and forget it, or keep it simple, or um, the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance. This is brain dead easy to do. This, as long as you have a good motherboard and good memory, this is also brain dead easy to do. 6400, that is much harder. If you want to run 6400 at a 1-to-1 ratio, that 6400 is harder than 8000. Let me repeat that. 6400 1-to-1 is harder to run stable than 8000. And even if you get 6400 working stably, unless you won the Silicon Lottery, you're typically going to have much higher idle power consumption compared to someone who's running their RAM at 8000. Because if you're running your RAM at 8000, your VSOC is like 1.18 volts versus like 1.27 volts for 6400. So that is significant. That is a significant increase in voltage going from 8000 down to 6400. So that's really, I mean, I'm the type of person, I'm going to go the path of least resistance. What is the easiest thing to do? This is the easiest thing to do. So if I'm going to do 4 sticks of DDR5, what's the easiest way to do that? Single rank, 4 sticks, 6000, done. If we want to do 2 sticks and we want to be a baller and run it like an enthusiast, we're going to go 8000 because that's going to give us lower idle power than someone who's running 6400 or even 6000 for that matter. And it's clocking super high, and all you got to do is tune like TREFI or something to drop the latency way, way down and benefit from that massive high frequency. So, you know, like that's pretty much it. I don't mess with F clock. There's no reason to. You know what? I've seen comments on memory overclocking videos in the comment section where people are like, I set F clock to 2133 and I'm losing performance. Please help. And you know what that means? That means that the person's system is unstable. It means that their fabric is clock stretching and doing error correction, and it's not actually stable at 2133. So they should probably slow it down. But yeah, F clock causing audio cuts. You know what that means? That means it's unstable. That is a sign of instability. Your computer should never have audio cuts. Your computer should never have stuttering issues. It should never have any of those problems. Those problems are a symptom of an unstable overclock. And that usually means someone is either messing with the F clock and it's not stable, so they need to back that speed down, or they need to raise the voltage, typically the VSOC. And the other thing too is F clock doesn't like a lot of VSOC. So a lot of times when people are trying to crank up the VSOC just so they can overclock their memory controller, that has the negative effect of destabilizing the F clock or the fabric itself. So that is the reason why, like I said earlier, I'm the type of guy, I want the path of least resistance. I want the easiest thing that I know will work and will be 100% stable. And those choices are either 6000 or 8000. I'm not going to mess around with 7200. It's completely pointless for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. And we're not going to mess with F clock because I don't want to run high VSOC. There's no reason to do that. You're not really going to get any better benefit. And if you end up getting like audio cuts or like weird stutters and you've been messing with F clock, that's because your system is not stable. And that is not a good thing. $6,400. You found Buildzoids and Game Tech's suggestions useful. 8,000 is just plain expensive. Yeah, 8,000 is expensive, but it's not nearly as expensive as it was a year ago, though. It's better to bet on 6,400. Otherwise, you can always go back down to 6,000. Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's sound logic. I I mean, I'll tell you guys, like my two DIMM configs are 6400 for high density. So basically all the RAM that you guys see in the description of this video, that is the RAM that I recommend because that is the RAM that I'm actually using. That is actually the RAM that I'm using. So I can vouch for that because I know that works. That 8000 kit that I always talk about, I use it because, or I recommend it because I'm using it and I know it works. And the 6400 kit, that is when I'm doing 96 gigabytes at 6400. So that's where I'm going, like 2 DIMM, high density, dual rank, max capacity on a single DIMM, dual rank. So it's going to be like a 48 gigabyte DIMM, and I know that works, and it's 100% stable, and I don't have to worry about it. I can put the computer to sleep. I can wake it up. I can like literally never shut off the computer. Just put the computer to sleep so it saves everything in the RAM. And the only annoying thing about doing that is when you put the computer to sleep, the RGB on the G.Skill Trident Z5 and the Z5 Neo, those RGB stay on. The rest of the computer's off. All the fans are shut off. The radiator's turned off. All the keyboard lights are off. The monitors are off. But guess what? The memory, the G.Skill RAM, is just blaring away, full blast, RGB going the whole time while the computer is off. Because the computer's asleep. And when the computer's asleep, it is doing something called suspend to RAM, which means the state of the operating system is literally suspended in the memory. So it's almost like the computer is put in like carbonite. It's frozen carbonite, like Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. And when we turn it back on, we defrost the whole thing. Everything's up. Instantaneously up. Everything's up. Browser windows, everything's there. Everything's there. I don't have to wait for Windows to boot. I don't have to wait for anything. I literally click the mouse, computer wakes up, everything's there the way I left it. And that is how I use my computer. And I need the computer to be 100% stable for that feature to work reliably. And that's the reason why I either do 6000 or 6400 or 8000, but nothing else. All those numbers in between don't matter. So 72 doesn't matter, 76 doesn't matter, maybe 78, but really those don't.
Can I run my 32 by 2 6000 C30 G.Skill Trident Z5 at 6400 instead?
So it's not rated to do that, but you probably can. You probably can try it, but you'd have to test the stability of it. Most of the memory that's 64 or 6000 is binned from the exact same chips. It's all the exact same Hynix M die. So most likely it would work. But you would have to test the stability to make sure. But yeah, so 6400 at 32, that would work. Most likely. I don't think you would need to mess with the voltages, but maybe I'm guessing that's 1.35 volts. But yeah, you could definitely try it and see if it works. I mean, the worst case is it's going to be slightly unstable, so you'd have to like either up the voltage or you would have to loosen the timings, and it would most likely work. Oh, HDZ did it and it worked. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, that'll probably work. So I usually go the other way around though. So if I have memory that's rated for 64 CL32, I typically drop it to 6000 CL30 because that ends up maintaining that 200 ratio that I was mentioning earlier. You know, that 200 number right here. So I tend to do that a lot, but I just do that because that allows an easier synchronization between the three numbers. So when you're in a 1-to-1 ratio, the other sort of unwritten rule for the fabric is that F clock should be 1/3 the DDR5 number. So like if, for example, DDR5 6000, 1/3 of 6000 is 2000. So F clock at 2000 for DDR5 6000 is achieving that unwritten rule of being 1/3 of the maximum speed. This does not apply when you're in a 2-to-1 ratio. Only in a 1-to-1 ratio does that matter. So if you're running 6400, technically F-clock should be overclocked when running 6400. Now, it doesn't really matter, and I tend not to mess with F-clock even if I'm running the memory at 6400. But you can try 6400 and see if it works fine. Most likely it will. But there's the thing with RAM, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people haven't really heard about, or like the F-clock 1/3 of max DDR speed, and that kind of thing's like an unwritten rule that no one really talks about. The fact that the reason why 6000 is a sweet spot is because that's the upper bound limit of the memory control, which is around 3 gigahertz. That's kind of where it maxes out. So some people can get it to run at 3100 or 3200, but those are pretty much the golden samples. That means you won the silicon lottery. But for most people, like I said, I just like to make things very easy. I like to make things or do things that are repetitive, like they're easy to follow. If I do a 6400, like if I show people in a video, like, oh, this is how you do 6400 at 1-to-1, not everybody can achieve the same result because not everybody's going to win the silicon lottery. So I don't like that. I mean, it's cool to show, like, this is what can be achieved on certain chips, but I like to do things where everyone can follow along, regardless of what their CPU is, regardless of what their RAM is. So, like, if we're doing 6000, I know it's easy to do. It's easy to repeat. You can scale it up to 4 sticks of RAM. It's just going to work. And if we're doing 8000, we will do 8000 because I know it's easier than 6400. So most people can do it. The only caveat is you got to have a good motherboard. Without a good motherboard, 8000 won't be stable because the motherboard, the quality of the motherboard wire traces from the CPU socket out to the DRAM needs to be very good quality for 8000 to work reliably. So that's like the one caveat there. So, okay, so that, I think that kind of answers the RAM questions. Yeah, that can be done, but that 6000 CL28 is typically going to require higher voltages, though, like 1.4 volts on the RAM. Okay, so we talked about Intel's Arc B580. So if someone wants to play games at 1080p, this is probably a decent choice. So it's coming out next week. The Intel Arc B580. They have a nice looking... I really do like the look of Intel's reference design here for their limited edition. They're going with the flow-through, which means this... Obviously, this doesn't use a lot of power. I think the TDP on this is like 190 watts. So it's less power than the previous generation. But it is also a smaller chip. And it's also like a 192-bit bus. So it's definitely... 192-bit bus typically means 1080p gaming when I hear that. Did I ever publish the full video of the 4X48? Did we do that in the second live stream? I don't think I did. So that video will probably come in January. Well, so basically what I have planned, we're going to do some overclocking videos for the 9800X 3D in the future. So, and I also want to show the Godlike, overclocking on the Godlike, and then overclocking on the Asus. I don't think I've done an Asus overclocking video on this channel yet. I know we've done a lot of Gigabyte and we've done a lot of ASRock. We've done Gigabyte for like 2 years. We've done ASRock for like a year. Only now am I able to start showcasing Asus examples and MSI. Even most recently, obviously, with the Godlike, we can now show MSI overclocking guides. But I do want to show how to do CPU overclocking. There's a lot of memory videos on the channel. I agree with you, though. Like, I do want to make another 48x4 video. But there are people who want to know how to do that. But the problem with doing that is, like I said earlier, 4 times 48 or 4 times 32 is very, very motherboard specific. So, like if I do a video with a Tai Chi, for example, that video is only going to be relevant for people with an ASRock motherboard. If somebody tries to copy the settings and they're on an Asus motherboard, it's not guaranteed to work. It's most likely going to be unstable. And if they don't fully vet the stability of the system, they're going to end up corrupting their operating system. They're going to have to reinstall Windows. It's just going to be really, really annoying. So that's why I hesitate to make those type of videos that frequently, because those type of videos are very specific to what is actually shown in the video. Meaning, you can't just copy paste my settings. Like if I'm doing a Tai Chi, like if I'm showing how to do something on a Tai Chi motherboard, if somebody has a Gigabyte or an MSI or an Asus and they're like, "Oh, I can just copy these settings." No, well, no, they can copy it. Doesn't mean it's gonna work, right? So that's the reason why I don't do that many videos on that. Because you'd be surprised. There's tons and tons of comments on those other videos of people. There's people who ask whether it'll work on their motherboard, and it's usually some other motherboard from a different vendor. Or it's like, well, I tried this and it didn't work, but they're running a different kit of RAM. It's not the same one that I was using. So that's another thing. Like, it's not only is it motherboard specific, it's also memory dependent. So, there's just so many different variables there that I feel like those type of videos are kind of like, they're entertaining more than they're actually valuable in terms of like, oh, you can follow along and do this and it works. Whereas if I do a CPU overclocking video, or if I do a how to run 8000 on 2 sticks of RAM video, like those are much easier to follow because those don't require manual tuning of the proct ODT and the pull up value and the pull down resistor and all that stuff. Like you don't have to mess with that if you just want to run your RAM at 8000. Will Godlike OC Guide work the same for... Yes, it will. It will. Because the menu items are exactly the same. So, okay. For PBO overclocking, the Godlike, the Carbon, and the Tomahawk are all going to be the same. Now, where it's going to differ is if I start showing how to do BCLK, base clock overclocking. Base clock overclocking will not be available to anyone on a Tomahawk motherboard. Unfortunately, the Tomahawk does not have an external clock generator, which means you cannot access something called asynchronous mode. The Godlike, and I've been told the Carbon, both of those motherboards support the external clock generators, which means the Carbon and the Godlike support something called asynchronous mode, also known as ECLK or BCLK overclocking. And that is something that you cannot do on a Tomahawk, unfortunately. This is where this is where the higher end motherboards, this is where the more expensive motherboards try to justify the added expense of spending more money on a motherboard. So only the flagship motherboards typically offer that feature. So the Tomahawk, unfortunately, will... So if I do a video on how to overclock a 9800X3D to, say, 5.7 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz, and if I'm doing this on a Godlike, the only people who can follow that to the T and literally copy paste all the settings are people with Godlike or with Carbon. People with Tomahawk will not be able to do that, unfortunately. So that's how they get you to spend more money on motherboards. So with Asus, anyone with a Hero can also follow along, and so can people with the Dash E. The Dash E Strix also has access to that feature. But yeah, that's that's what's in the plans for the next set of videos. But yeah, we will revisit memory stuff again, probably next year. The Intel B580, I haven't really, I don't know. Do you guys think this is worth, like, getting this Intel Arc B580? I'm kind of interested in getting one of these to do some videos on it. Like like a 1080p or 1440p gaming machine. I don't know. Like, it's $250. It looks interesting. Neo saying no. So you think this is a waste of money? Intel Arc is a bad idea. Don't waste your time. For AV1 encoding, maybe. Well, the thing is, I don't need it for AV1 encoding because I already have. I already have AV1 encoding. We're literally AV1 encoding right now off of an AMD graphics card. Just return it before you can't. Man, I hate doing that. That's a bad way to, like, ruin your reputation with the reseller or with the well, like if it's Micro Center, for example. You may snag the B580 for kicks if you can get the Intel version. You want me to get the 5090? I don't know if I can. Well, okay. Well, that's a good segue, actually. I guess we can actually migrate and start talking about the RTX 50 series. Although I don't have any articles for that. I have a bunch of, like, AMD discloses CES press event. We'll probably talk about AMD at the end. So I guess we'll talk about Nvidia's Blackwell stuff now. So Nvidia's Blackwell Ultra GB300 AI servers expected to debut by mid of next year, featuring fully liquid cooling and much higher performance. So this is it. The new Nvidia Blackwell is on the way. So AI, they are targeting AI servers with their next generation. So with the AI, there are currently two styles of doing AI in enterprise. So there is the really big H100, H200. So that's the really, really big. It's the AI accelerator. It's the really huge one. That thing, plus dual AMD EPYC CPUs, is typically what that sort of solution looks like. The alternative to that, which is actually what I think is going to be more popular as time goes by, is the traditional server that has up to 8 Nvidia GPUs. So this Blackwell GB300 AI servers, this is going to be in the more, we'll call it mainstream AI solution, where you typically have 8 graphics cards in a server chassis, and you have dual Intel Xeon or AMD EPYC CPUs, and you have lots and lots of memory, and you have maybe some amount of storage, depending on what the model's doing, if it's inferencing versus if it's training. But typically, these sort of solutions are going to be mostly for inferencing and cloud-hosted SaaS-based solutions. But it's on the way. So Nvidia is really all in on going all out on AI, and this is going to continue being a thing all throughout 2025. Why not go for the 9950X 3D or the 9800X 3D? The Arc is so lame. Well, see, I think you guys are missing the point. The point of the Intel Arc, so Intel Arc B580 and 5090 should never be mentioned in the exact same sentence. These are two different things. They're not even, like, okay, the only thing that they have in common is that they're graphics cards. And that's where it ends. They have nothing else in common. They're not meant for the same person. They're not meant for the same monitor. They're not meant for the same use. Well, okay, If it's gaming, I don't even know if the 5090 is going to be marketed for gaming, to be honest, at this point. Because the Nvidia Titan was never really marketed exclusively for gaming. It was definitely more of like some sort of semi-professional, prosumer product. And I kind of think the 5090 is going to be marketed in a similar fashion. So, yeah, it's anyone who's interested in 5090 is probably not going to be interested in ARC. But we're talking to two different types of people. Someone who is going to consider Intel ARC is someone who was never going to consider a 5090 in the first place. Like, it was never on their radar. It doesn't exist to them. You know, it's like if you're going to buy a car, are you actually going to buy a Ferrari? Or do you just kind of, you know that it exists, but you never actually look at a Ferrari? Like, because you realistically, are you ever going to buy a Ferrari? It's that sort of logic. Like, am I going to buy a regular car or am I going to buy a supercar? Like, am I buying a regular commuter car or am I buying an exotic? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the sort of thing this is the sort of logic you have to have when you think about these things. Like, meaning talking about ARC and 5090 is like comparing a Toyota Corolla to a Ferrari. Like, who would do that? That's like an irrational comparison. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? It's not, they're both cars. And that's where it ends. They're both cars. There's like nothing else that's similar about them. You know what I'm saying? Intel is a scooter. What? Intel is a scooter? No, dude, it runs on electricity. You can't say that it's a scooter. That's like human powered. You talking about an actual motorized scooter? That's hilarious. Intel's a scooter. Man, people like to make fun of Intel on these streams. I'm not. See, I don't like that because, first of all, these guys literally lost their CEO earlier this week. Pat Gelsinger, he resigned because for whatever reason, like either he's like, you know, I just want to retire like 2 years early, or it was most likely that wasn't the reason why he resigned. I think there was something more to it. But they've literally lost their CEO. They've lost their CEO. And he was literally the best CEO they have had in years. In years. Intel was being led by the bean counters. Then they finally got someone who actually knows things about the technology. Then they kicked him out because he had criticized, you know, he said some controversial things that he probably should not have said about his competitors, and there was backlash for that, and he did that multiple times. And then there was the whole thing about the memes, and Intel, AMD's in the rearview mirror, and Nvidia's CUDA is a footnote in history. And, you know, he said stuff that he probably should not have said in public. As someone who is, like, at the top of a company, you probably need to think before you speak. But, you know, I don't think that's what really caused him to lose his job. I think ultimately the foundry business has been having problems, just continuous problems. Profitability has become a problem for them because they're having to rely on TSMC. When they finally made a product on TSMC, which was the Intel Arc A770 and A750 2 years ago, it was basically garbage. The hardware was sound, but nothing else about it was good. So at launch, it got better over 2 years, but it never could catch up to AMD, like, or Nvidia 7600, and the 4060 were still like way faster than the A770 in basically everything. So, you know, like, and they're using TSMC, so the bean counters weren't happy about that because they're not making any money on this graphics card. So it's like, well, what are we doing? Roger Kodori left the company for whatever reason. Either they fired him or told him to leave, and whatever, you know, he overpromised, underdeliver, whatever the excuse was, whatever the reason was, Raja left, Who knows what's going on? They poached another guy from Nvidia, though. Tom Peterson had been there for a number of years now. They got Chi from Nvidia. He's over there now, so hopefully he's probably going to help turn things around. But in terms of the top, like, CEO, Pat Gelsinger was actually a pretty good CEO. Overall, he was a pretty good CEO. He was trying to turn the ship around. Unfortunately, they got rid of him, so I don't know what's going to happen now. People last week were saying that Intel's cooked. I don't know if they're cooked, but they're definitely getting deep fried right now, and I don't know how they're going to turn out after the next 6 months or next 2 or 3 quarters where they'll be at. But the foundry business is a huge problem for them. Like, no joke, the foundry business is a huge problem for them right now, and they can't seem to figure out, like, what to fix or how to, like, get this thing going, or I don't know what's going on. There was another article today about the, where is it? Oh yeah, this one. Intel Foundry fails to impress once again. 18 angstrom process. Yield rates are reportedly to be only 10%, making mass production impossible. %10 yields. 10% yields. 10% yields. You cannot sell products if you have only 10% of the wafers have good chips on them. That is bad. This is probably the reason that he was kicked out. This is probably one of the reasons. And I don't know, I don't think Pat is to be blamed for this. It's like, who do you blame when this happens? Who takes the fall for this? Now, obviously, the CEO, he's the top, cut him out. You know, he gets to become the scapegoat on Wall Street. Everybody like, oh, tar and feather, Pat Gelsinger, he's out. Goodbye, get out of here. You know, here's your golden parachute, whatever, you're gone. So anyway, he takes the blame and then gets out. But now what happens? Does that actually solve the problem? 10% yields? So this is the reason why Qualcomm, remember the rumor about Qualcomm thinking of buying Intel? Well, that went away. This probably had something to do with that. They're like, no. This can turn into like so many different memes right now. You know, like the 10% yield thing. Like, first there was AMD Zen 5%, then there was Intel Core Ultra negative 285%. Now we got Intel at like Intel Foundries is now like 10% yields. 10% yields. Intel Foundry gets struck with another massive problem, making division sell-off imminent for now. Who wants to buy this foundry business from Intel if it's only doing 10% yields? Who would dare spend probably a couple $1 billion to buy this? No, AMD's not going to buy this. No. No one's going to buy this. Samsung could probably afford Intel. You think Samsung wants to buy this? This is like buying a used graphics card that has memory artifacting issues. This would be like if you were to buy an RTX 4090 that had a melted connector and the memory artifacts at stock. Do you want to buy that? Does that look attractive? Like, this is not good. You know what this means? First of all, these wafers are like $25,000 a wafer. And only 10% of the wafer is usable? So you're going to tell me you're going to spend $25,000 for this wafer, for one wafer, and only 10% of that can be turned into products that can be sold. The remaining 90% is complete garbage and gets thrown away and recycled. Is that worth $25,000 per wafer? Assuming that's what it might even be $30-something thousand because this is like the newest node. So 25,000 per wafer and only 10% of it works. Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. That's a problem. This is probably why he got fired. Even though, you know, to his credit, he probably is not the right person to blame for this. But like I said earlier, who do you blame? Who takes the blame when this sort of stuff is public? The CEO? Obviously, the CEO has to take responsibility. Who's incompetent here, though? Is this the engineers? Are the engineers to blame? Are they just terrible at their job and they just can't get their act together? Do we need to fire all the engineers and hire just poach a bunch of people from TSMC? Just offer them like 50% salary hikes or whatever to come and work for Intel instead of TSMC? Is that what they need to do? Is it a problem with management? Are the engineering managers, are they to blame? Are they hiring incompetent staff that are unqualified for the job? Like, what is the problem here, guys? Like, this looks like it's a problem with either middle management or the actual engineers are to blame. Because they're not meeting their goals, they're not meeting their deadlines. I assume they're like behind again and again and again. So what's the root cause of this issue? Is it the engineers? Is it the middle managers? Is it the director level management? Is it the vice president level? Do they have incompetent vice presidents who set unrealistic goals? Is that what it is? And they set the stage for failure on Wall Street because they overpromise and then underdeliver? Like, what is the problem here? Pat got fired of his comments, which lost them the... Is firing him going to guarantee they get the discount back, though? See, to me, that sounds kind of petty. That's a petty reason to fire somebody. Other issues also... And how does that guarantee they get the discount back just by firing him? ASML doesn't have to give them back the discount just because they fired a CEO. Hey, Beto joined the channel. Thanks for the subscription. Welcome to the channel. TSMC folks will be under non-compete. Oh, yeah. Because he was the one who made the comments. Yeah, but how does that guarantee ASML will give them back the discount? Did ASML like literally hold the discount hostage and said you have to fire your CEO or you're not getting the discount back? See, I don't think we'll ever know the answer on that. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen here. But, like, okay, see, a lot of people are talking about a company buying Intel. How exactly is buying Intel going to fix the problem? Do we actually understand what the problem is? Like, that's why I keep asking the question. Like, what is actually the root cause of the problem? Is it an engineering failure problem? Meaning, are the engineers incompetent? Are they not qualified to do their job? Have too many senior engineers retired and they've been replaced by a bunch of college graduates who need mentors or something? Like, what's going on? Like, something's not right. Like, as an outsider looking at this, reading this story, I immediately want to blame the engineers, or I want to blame the managers who hired those engineers. Because either they were not cut out to do the job, or so that's not necessarily a problem with the engineer. That is actually a problem with middle management. That means that somebody hired someone who is not qualified to do the job. But obviously these are large teams, So you can't just blame one engineer who's not qualified to do the job. It's going to be like a team effort, which means that there's a cultural problem with the overall way the internals of the company are structured. I mean, they had a lot of layoffs this year too. They let go a lot of people throughout this year. So I don't know what the solution is because I don't actually know what is the root cause of the problem. Obviously, it's really challenging. 18 angstrom is no joke. Like, this is not an easy thing to do. But, and 18 angstrom is actually more, it's smaller and more dense than the TSMC 2 nanometer. But the TSMC 2 nanometer is on track and it works. And it has much higher yields. So I don't know, like, to me, it kind of seems like it's an engineer, like a skill issue. It seems like it's a skill issue. I'm not saying that this should be easy, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if TSMC is just, like, humming along smoothly and everything's going according to plan, over here, you have Intel just, like, tripping and fumbling all over themselves, and every single time I see a news article about Intel Foundry, it's always bad news. It's never something good. It's always something bad. So to me, it's like, it seems like there's a skill issue at Intel. Like, somebody is not qualified or somebody's not doing something correctly. That's what this looks like to someone who has no visibility into what's actually going on at ground zero over here at Intel. Intel to lay off several hundred employees to its Israeli R&D centers report. Oh, wow. Yeah, see, they're laying off a bunch of people. I don't know, man. Everyone's talking about a sell-off is imminent. I mean, that big layoffs sounds like a sell-off is imminent. I don't know who's going to buy this, though, because this is a really stinky pile, if you know what I'm saying. All of these huge orgs are bloated. There's going to be gross incompetence throughout every layer. Yeah, it does fall into leadership. That's what I was saying. I mean, obviously, you know, Pat Gelsinger ends up being the scapegoat because he set the course that they're going to follow, and he said it was going to be I think he said it was a 5-year plan, and he was only there for like just over 3 years, and then he was let go. He was only supposed to be there for 5 years. Intel has a mandatory rule. You cannot stay employed at Intel after the age of 45, or not 45, 65. You are forced to retire at 65 years of age. It doesn't matter who you are, or what level of, like, how high up or low you in the company. As soon as you hit 65, you retire. So Pat Gelsinger, when he joined, I mean, he's like, I think 63. He'll either be 63 next, I think he'll be 63 next year or 64 next year. I forget. Anyway, the point is, he had a 5-year plan, and he knew that he was only going to be there for 5 years max, because at the end of his 5th year, he would turn 65, and he'd be forced to retire. So, he didn't get to see his plan all the way through. So we won't know exactly what the full extent of, because, you know, some of the problems were actually set in motion before he was there. So that's why I feel like it's a little unfair to put all the blaming on Pat Gelsinger, because I think, like, ultimately he did what he could do. He was trying to make the best with the hand that he was dealt, but, you know, sometimes things are out of control, and you got to be the scapegoat when that happens. That's what happens. His plans takes. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. 5 nodes in 4 years. Yeah, that was his plan. So, I mean, the guy was approaching retirement age, and his original plan was to retire after setting Intel straight and, like, on the trajectory for success, but clearly that didn't happen. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. They're definitely in a really weird spot. I don't think they're going anywhere. Like the foundry business specifically is in shambles. Like I don't really know. They literally got like all this US government money. They got like billions and billions of dollars from taxpayer money. And there's like nothing to show for it. It's very embarrassing. It's very embarrassing to think that the US government gave Intel like what, $8 billion or something like that, or and then like a more over the next whatever the time frame was that they were going to build all those foundries out. And then there was the one they were going to do in Germany, and then they like put that on hiatus for like 2 years or whatever. It was either Germany or Poland. It was one of those two. I think it was Germany. And then they like paused it because based off of demand, we're not gonna do this right now. So it's like, I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing. Intel's the new NASA. I wouldn't go that far. NASA's not really a publicly traded company. Your only real grievance with Pat is if he was responsible for canceling Beast Lake. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Okay, well, yeah, it's, yeah. In other news, AMD discloses the CES 2025 press event details. Who did they disclose this to? Expect RDNA 4 GPUs, Strix Halo, and Kraken Point APUs, and much more. So, Strix Halo, I don't think we're going to see this in desktop. This is going to be like some kind of like mini PC or some sort of handheld thing or whatever. The Kraken Point is probably, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the successor to Strix Point. But this is going to be more of like a refresh of Strix Point. So Kraken Point will be Zen 5 based, just like how Strix Point is Zen 5 based. So think of it like, I think it was what, Phoenix, and then there was, what was it, Hawk Point? Hawk Point was 8000 series, Phoenix was 7000 series. So Phoenix was Zen 4, and then Hawk Point was Zen 4, like the same, it was Zen 4 again. It was like revised, it was like Zen 4 Plus, which was the 8000 series on APUs and mobile. So Kraken Point is going to be like Zen 5 Plus. So that's going to be the new laptops that come out in the second half of next year. They'll probably start shipping some of these in the spring, probably around May. But don't expect these laptops with Kraken Point to show up until the second half of the year. So this will most likely be like a holiday. A year from now is when these things will be really in the market. But Strix Halo is going to be an interesting part. I think that's a very interesting one. I want to see what they do for the APUs on desktop, because the 8700G was actually quite good with the AV1 encoder, 8-core, 16-thread. So something like that, either Strix or a Kraken Point on desktop, that'll be interesting to see, because that will basically give them the APU similar to what Intel's doing with Intel Core Ultra and Intel Core Ultra V for next year. January 6th. So how long is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's like 4.5 weeks from now. Will be the AMD at CES event. Wow, they already have the Twitter post for like when it's actually going to take place. So yeah, they've done a lot of interesting things over the last 2 years. Like AMD purchased a company. So AMD has purchased two very, very important companies. They have made 2 acquisitions, and they've also partnered with MediaTek in certain things for like the networking side. But AMD purchased a company called Xilinx. You may or may not have heard of them, but Xilinx makes a lot of FPGAs and custom ASICs. AMD purchased them. That is a huge boost to them in terms of like getting their name out there, because a lot of other OEM and companies that make a lot of big enterprise grade solutions, they use Xilinx. So now they're basically using AMD. And then another company that you may or may not have heard of that they purchased recently was another company called, I think, Pensando. Pensando is another very key acquisition. So under Lisa Su's leadership, AMD has continued to grow and become significantly more powerful and a much more irritating mosquito in Intel's room, so to speak, because they're clearly not in the rearview mirror, especially now with the new X3D CPUs on desktop. But they're doing really good in the data center. And not only are they good with the CPUs in the data center, they're also right up there with Nvidia in the AI accelerator GPU stuff with their MI300X, their MI2 or 325. All those, they basically have the same sort of products that Nvidia sells in the AI space. Now, where AMD falls short, obviously, is on the software side, because Nvidia has such a massive head start in the software ecosystem compared to AMD. So AMD's having to play catch up there, but at least they can match Nvidia in terms of the product offerings. So not only do they match Nvidia in the hardware side for the DPU and the GPU, they also are outperforming Intel in the CPU space on both consumer desktop and in the enterprise server space with the EPYC CPUs for server. And then I guess if you look at like Strix point on the mobile, AMD has all these strategic wins in the mobile space for the gamers. Like, if you want a new gaming laptop, if you want the best gaming laptop going into next year, it's going to typically include a Strix Point laptop. So that's that Ryzen AI HX 370 plus an Nvidia RTX 40 series GPU. So basically, the winning combination for laptop has become AMD Ryzen AI plus Nvidia RTX. Like, that is it. What's kind of weird, so I believe Scott Herkelman left AMD, but I think Frank Azor is still there, or maybe Frank Azor left. If he left, maybe that explains why do you guys remember the AMD Advantage laptop? Like, AMD came out with the standard, like the AMD Advantage laptop. It was typically like a gaming laptop that was supposed to come with a Ryzen CPU. It was a mobile Ryzen CPU, obviously, and it was a Radeon laptop GPU. I don't know what happened to that, because it's like they had a couple of like cool looking gaming laptops and workstation laptops, and then it just kind of like tapered off and just went nowhere. And now it's like, if you want a high-end laptop, you're basically going with a Ryzen AI and an Nvidia GeForce in the same laptop. And that's like the ideal AI desktop replacement in a mobile form factor. So I don't know what happened to the AMD Advantage laptops, because like what are they doing with the mobile? I guess they don't really care, because Nvidia has kind of gobbled up. They've locked the discrete GPU in laptop market up, and I think it's all about like where AMD sees the most growth opportunity. So they're basically taking the wafers that they are allocated from TSMC, and they are dividing them to the most growth markets. So, like, for example, obviously the server market, the EPYC, that's huge. The AI, the MI300 and all that stuff, that's huge. So they're going to allocate wafers to those things for the high margin business, but then they're also going to market to the gamers on desktop. So that's where you're going to see all these 9800 X3D, 9950 X3D, and all the other Zen 5, 9000 series stuff. But then in the laptop space, where are they strong? They're strong in the CPU, in the APU. So they're going with Strix point-based mobile chips. Not so much Radeon, because apparently people don't care about Radeon much on laptops. So it's like, okay, we're not going to make them. I think that's what happened. They just didn't allocate enough volume to the Radeon mobile. And as a result, you're seeing all these new laptops are basically AMD CPU plus, AMD APU plus Nvidia GPU. Otherwise, it's just AMD APU, and it's a thin and light or an Ultrabook that competes with Lunar Lake and the Qualcomm stuff. But that's basically what I'm concluding from looking at some of this stuff that they have been talking about. Will the Intel GPU division be the saving grace to get them out of trouble? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. No. What's going to keep Intel afloat is their longtime buyers that only buy Intel and the other business units that they operate in. So like the networking division, for example. So they sell a lot of like networking cards and stuff like that. But that's also threatened by Nvidia's InfiniBand, sort of, at least in the AI space. And then also AMD and MediaTek and Pensando acquisition and stuff like that. You think Intel's losing money in the GPU division? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. So definitely the GPU is not going to save Intel. It's going to have to come from some other place. Okay, speaking of the GPUs, so I'm going to touch on this briefly. So AMD Radeon RX 8800 XT RDNA 4 GPU allegedly offers 45% faster RT performance than... Wait a minute, what? 45% faster RT than a 7900 XTX, on par with RTX 4080 in rasterization and lower power too. Whoa. Wait, what? Wow. What? This is so much the return of the 5700 XT. This is the return of the 5700 XT. All you got to do is substitute this with the 5700 XT, and you substitute this with the Radeon 7, and you substitute this with the RTX 2080. And this is what you get. Or actually, okay, maybe the 2070 Super, I guess. Is that right? Yeah, something like that. But basically, you substitute all those names, and you basically get that story. Lower power. It uses less power than what? Than the 4080? Or does it use less power than the XTX? If it uses less power than the 4080, then that is very impressive. That is very impressive. %45 RT. Well, okay, I don't know what you mean by the 4090. 4090 is only like 22% faster than this. So, no, this isn't going to be like a 4090. Although, I don't know what the difference in the RT is. How much faster is a 4090 in RT than an XTX? I don't actually know. Man, this sounds very impressive, though. 45% faster RT than an XTX. That is basically a generational uplift. That is a generational uplift. even if the rasterization is slower than the XTX, if it's only like a 4080, then it isn't even that much slower than an XTX. We're talking like 3 to 5% slower. Let's see. AMD's top RDNA 4 GPU might end up being a strongly positioned mainstream product if the latest rumors are correct. AMD's Radeon 8800 XT allegedly offers strong RT and rasterization uplifts while keeping the power consumption at a minimum. The latest rumor about the RDNA 4, who previously revealed the 9800X3D launch dates, which turned out to be accurate, and has also shared information on AMD's upcoming GPUs, such as the next generation UDNA. In his forum post, he talks about the upcoming flagship, which sounds very nice. It is stated that the AMD GPUs will officially enter mass production in the middle of December. That means that they're coming in Q1 of next year, which is just a few weeks from now. This falls in line with the Q1 release date, which these GPUs are planned for. Because you know what this means. If this means that the GPUs are in mass market or mass production, that means that all they're doing is they're building the chips and they're shipping them to the AIBs that have ordered, they've already paid, or they not paid, they've already ordered the actual chips to put in their actual AIB cards. So these things might actually launch as early as March of next year, which is perfect timing for my most anticipated game of next year. That game being Monster Hunter Wilds. So this might launch around the same time as Monster Hunter Wilds. It may end up being in April, though, but who knows? Okay, here. This is it. This is the full post. This is the full post from this guy. AIB officially started mass production in December. Although it is ready for mass production, there are still some minor bugs. Power consumption compared to XTX, minus 25%. Biohazard 4, this is Resident Evil 4 Remake, for those wondering what that is. Ray tracing compared to XTX is plus 45%. Whoa, that means somebody tested Resident Evil 4 with ray tracing, and they found that this card is 45% faster than an XTX in that specific game. That is huge. 45% improvement in ray tracing is no joke. That is a generational uplift for ray tracing. So this is definitely RDNA 4. Other mainstream games were also tested. Ray tracing is indeed an epic improvement. The main reason is that it was too bad before. Huh? What does that mean? Other mainstream games, ray tracing is indeed an epic improvement. The main reason is that it was too bad before. I don't understand. The main reason was... Okay, I guess he's just saying that RDNA 3's ray tracing didn't deliver. In short, it is said that raster ray tracing is basically 4080/4080 Super. TD Huang will not turn around and use 5070 to kill the whole family, right? What does that mean? Well, I don't understand what this last sentence is, but anyway, yeah, that is very interesting. Very interesting stuff. Coming to the juicy tidbits. Okay, well, we just read the whole thing. So, I hope they do a reference card. I really like AMD's reference cards. I like all the reference cards, if you couldn't already tell, from my GPU collection. So, if they do a reference card, I'm probably going to get one of these. If they don't do a reference card, I may not get one of these. At least not initially. Same thing with Nvidia. Nvidia must do a reference card. If they do a reference card, well, okay, it depends. It depends on the price because Nvidia is kind of stupidly expensive. But I will only buy the reference cards this time around. As for rasterization, the graphics card is said to match. Yeah, we already know. Okay, so I wish somebody could tell me what is the difference in ray tracing between a 7900 XTX and the 4080. Because the thing is, the 4080 is a little bit slower than an XTX. However, it's better in ray tracing. So if this new AMD card is 45 up to, because that was one game, up to 45% better in ray tracing, does that mean that it's better than the 4080 in ray tracing? So I don't know what that means. I'm not talking about the 4090. What about the 4080? Virtual link port? What is that? What is that for? You want USB-C for PSVR? Oh, you saw the video I did on that? How to get PSVR working without the adapter? You will pay $2,000 right now for the 5090? Okay, let's talk about 5090, although I don't have any articles on it except this one, which isn't really... Hold on, let's see if we can find one. RTX 5090. What's the best article here? Here it is. Nvidia's upcoming GeForce 5090 sees first retail appearance, being sold in Workstation. Pre-order by Camino. What? Oh, wait, is this really it? Oh, man, they're doing it. They're going to make it, like, super expensive, and it's going to be like a Workstation thing. They're basically going to try to say this is like a Titan. They're going to say it's like a Titan if they're doing this. 32 gigabytes is scary, though. That means it's going to be stupid expensive. If it's going to come with 32 gigs of RAM, that thing is going to be expensive. Because you can do a lot of LLM training on a 32 gigabyte GPU, which means they're going to want to charge a lot of money for that. If they gimp it and do like 24 or something, then it'll pay like $2,000. But man, they're doing 32 gigs of VRAM. That's going to be an expensive card. 512-bit bus. Remember, guys, if we go back to earlier this year, I said, I'm still surprised that if this is what the 5090 is, I'm actually surprised that this is the 5090, because I'm the guy who said that, so here, let's do paint now, because we don't really need the article. The article's not really, we clean all this stuff up, all the RAM stuff. Okay. So I'm the person who said at the beginning of the year, why is this? Remember what I said earlier this year. I said RTX 5090. Whoops. I said that this is a 448-bit with like 28 gigabytes of VRAM. I think that's what I said. I don't know if I said the memory amount, but I think that's what I said. And I said RTX 5090 Ti was the full 512 32 gigabyte. This is what I said at the beginning of, well, it was like back in like March or whatever. It was definitely earlier this year. It was when the Super series came out. So it would have been like Q1 of this year. I said, I went on record saying that the 5090 Ti would be a 512-bit. It would have 32. It was basically the Kopite Kimi rumors. Because that's what was said in the beginning. And I kind of said, yeah, the 5090 would be 448. and 28 gigs. And then I said, I think I said that the 5080 Ti was like, oh, what did I say about that one? I said like 384 bit. And then I said RTX 5080 was like 320 bit. That's what I said. This is what I said. So, obviously, it seems like some of this stuff is not true anymore. Now, this was like, okay, let's just put what I said over here. I said the following back in Q1. This is what I said. I don't remember the memory, so I'm just going to leave this off for now. This is what I said. Reality, current reality, seems to indicate that the 5090 will in fact be the 5-bit bus. If all the rumors seem to be coming true, this seems to be the reality now. And then, for some reason, the rumors seem to indicate that this is the case. To me, the thing that's very concerning here is this is going to have a massive separation in price. Meaning the 5090 is going to be so expensive, and the 5080 is going to be like $1,200. You know what I'm saying? Like, the 5080 is probably going to be $1,200. The 5090, I don't know, it's probably going to be like $2,500 or something. The problem with this is this leaves so much separation between the two of them. They can literally make multiple cards within here. They can do a 5080 Ti. They can do a 5080 Ti Super. They can do an RTX 5080 Super. They have enough, like, leeway because they have such a wide separation between these two compared to what I originally thought was going to be the reality. But it seems like this is what they're doing. Like, they're leaving the door open for all these 5080 numbers. So, like, this to me, like, I've already said this. I'll say this again, just to be clear. This is what I said earlier this year for the 5080 price. And especially now that it's still at 256, I mean, that's still going to be the price. So the price on the 5080 didn't change at all. However, this is where things get kind of screwy. Because if this is in fact 32 gigabytes, this can easily go for that. And people will pay that much money. It can easily go for that. In fact, it could even go to $2,999. It can easily go for this asking price. There's nothing stopping them from asking this much money for this card. Because this way, they can further supplant this as a Halo product. They can, by making it so much more expensive, they can elevate it to a godlike price that most people will only wish and dream. Their hopes and dreams, Oh, it's $3,000. Oh, I give up. I surrender. I surrender all. I will settle for the 5080. That way, they can sell more 5080s to the people who can't afford a $3,000 graphics card. Or they'll just think that, like, this is just stupid. Like, Nvidia has betrayed me. How dare you do this? How dare you do this, Nvidia? How dare you make this so expensive that now it's out of reach? Now, I hate you. I hate you. And then what do? 24 hours later, they go to Best Buy and buy a 5080 Founders Edition and spend and give Nvidia $1,200 plus tax. You know what I'm saying? So they get mad. They get mad. And then they cry about it in their room. And then the next day they go to Best Buy and buy a $1,200 5080 instead. And then after like 2 weeks, they start getting buyer's remorse of spending this much money on a 256-bit GPU. Just saying. Like, I mean, that's the reality. That's the reality. Two nanometer at video cards will be what? So this is kind of the sort of range, especially if this article about the workstation stuff is true. If this workstation stuff is true, then you know, this is kind of what they're gonna do, because let's go to Tech Power Up. So here's why they can do this. Hold on. So if we go here, hold on. What is this thing called? So several years ago now, Nvidia has done these things a couple of times in the past. So let's look at one example. So does anybody remember the Titan Volta? The Titan V. Nvidia Titan V. The GV100 with 12 gigabytes of VRAM of HBM2 on a 3072-bit bus. There it is, the Titan V. This graphics card was $3,000. $3,000. So back then, if you wanted the top Nvidia card, you had to spend $3,000 in the year of 2018. Titan V. 12 gigabytes of VRAM. $3,000. $3,000. So the people who seem to think that Nvidia can't charge $3,000, I'm sorry to tell you, but in 2018, they were already charging $3,000 for the 5090 type of product. Just FYI. And if you do the math for inflation, $3,000 in 2018 money was more than $3,000 today. So that was Titan V. There's also Titan Z. So we go further back. The Nvidia GeForce GTX Titan Z. The Titan Z, or the Titan Z. This was a dual GPU graphics card. It had two graphics cards, and it had the SLI built-in chip on here. It had a little controller that did the actual SLI link between the two. This graphics card was 6 gig times 2, so total was 12 gigabytes. You had 6 over here, and you had 6 over there. That's what it looked like. Yeah, the Titan Z. And you know how much this card cost back in May of 2014? 10 and a half years ago, just about. $3,000. $3,000 in money from 10 years ago. This card was marketed as a gamer's graphics card. GeForce GTX, the ultimate king of gaming, $3,000. So they can totally charge $3,000 and people will gobble it up. The AI companies trying to buy it on the cheap, they will be more than happy to spend $3,000. It's like, how much is it? $3,000? Okay, I'll take 50 of those. Or no, you know what? I want 500 of those. That's what the people will want to be purchasing. So they'll sell out instantly if they charge $3,000. Because who's going to buy them? Not the gamers. Only a few gamers will actually bother spending $3,000. It'll most likely be all the people that want to do the AI stuff. Because they're going to see this as, oh, $3,000? Man, that's a really good deal. That is so much cheaper than the enterprise cards. So, $3,000. Titan V, same deal. Let's see, what was another one? Oh, RTX Titan. The most recent one was the RTX Titan, which was the Turing-based. This is TU102. This was a 24 gigabyte with a 384-bit bus, Titan RTX. There it is. It was known as Titan. And you know how much it was? $2,500 from 2019. So this is probably the most relevant one in terms of like the last time Nvidia was marketing this type of product. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do. I think if Nvidia wanted, they could easily charge $3,000 and max profits on it and just treat it like it's a Titan Halo product. They could easily do $2,500 and they'll feel like they're being very generous with the gamers if they do $2,500. So, yeah, this was a big die. 794. What was the 3090 Ti? 3090 Ti was the maxed out GA102. Again, 24 gigabytes of VRAM. 384-bit bus. This die was 628 millimeters. This was smaller than the Titan, the last Titan RTX. And they charged $2,000 for the RTX 3090 Ti. So here's the thing, guys. If the 5090 is a 500... So if the rumors are to be believed, and it is in fact a 512 gigabit bus, that is a wider bus than the 384 on the 4090 and the 3090 Ti and the 3090 and even the old Titan. So there isn't really a reason for them to charge less than like $2,500 when you think about it. Like, do we even have any idea of how big the actual 5090 die is? Like, how big is the die? The die will ultimately determine how much they will charge. If we know how big the actual chip is, we can make a much more educated guess in terms of the price. But when I look at this, the fact that they charge $2,000 for a 384-bit full die. This is the full die. This isn't a cut down. This is the full die. And they were charging $2,000 for the full die. If the 5090 is, in fact, the full die, you can expect it to be very expensive. Die sizes were leaked last week. Do we have that info anywhere? Oh, is this it? I don't see the die on here. Is it on Tech Power Up? RTX 5090, 512, GB202, 21,760 cores, 32... Oh, this is not going to be cheap. GDDR7, 32 gigs, 512, this is not going to be cheap. And when I say cheap, I'm saying like 1500, 1600. Nah. For this is clearly more than the 3090 Ti. And that was $2,000. So, is this the full die, though? Like, is this 100% unlocked? If this is 100% unlocked, there is no reason why this is not $2,500 minimum. Go to video card Z. Video cards. Where is it? I just see a bunch of stuff about the Intel Arc, which we already talked about. Nvidia GeForce. This. The full die is 24. Hold up. Oh, wait. 24,576? Yeah, but even the cut down will still be the 744. 744. Oh, man. Whoa. That's not going to be cheap. 744. Says unknown. 744. Wait a minute. I'll Titan Z. Okay, the Titan. 754. 754 Titan RTX. Guess what? $2,500. RTX 4090. 609 millimeters. $1,600. RTX 3090 Ti. 628. $2,000. So hold on a second. So the 4090 was a little bit smaller than the 3090 Ti, so hence it would be cheaper. And then the Titan RTX was larger than both of those, and it was way more expensive at $2,500. So if what Met posted is true, 744 is just 10 millimeters smaller than the Titan RTX, which means this graphics card is going to be in that, in that range. 4090 is 609. 609 is the 4090. So if the 5090 is that much larger than the 4090, that is going to be expensive. And it has 32 gigabytes of VRAM. That's going to be expensive. 512-bit, that is not going to be cheap, man. That is, that's going to be a lot. See, I'm surprised that it's not cut down more. Where's the 448-bit bus that was rumored earlier this year? Because that's what I thought the 5090 was going to be. That is going to be a massive graphics card. That is huge. I don't understand why they are making that one be the 5090. I think it needs to be called a Titan, to be honest. Yeah. That 700 plus millimeter is going to be expensive. This thing is going to be around $2,500 probably. Yeah, it's like, that makes sense. This range makes sense. Like, the lower, less than this doesn't make much sense at all. So when I say this is the range, this is the range. You know why? Because the AIB is going to charge more than the baseline. So that makes sense. Based off of the historicals, it's pretty easy to make an educated guess on how much it's going to cost. A lot of people don't seem to study history. It's clear to me when people talking about how, oh, it can't be more than 2,000. Did you look at the older Nvidia cards? That one is probably going to be 16. No, actually, no. I think it was 20. Wasn't it rumored to be 20? It's either 20 or 16. Hold on. I think we have that one in here. RX88. Yeah, they even have it. 16 is what Tech Power Up says. $4090 name made sense with how cut down the GPU was, and it was only that. It is also PCI Gen 5. Someone leaked how the pins look like. No one had to tell us that. We already kind of assumed that was true. 256-bit 16 gig. Yeah, it's on Tech Power Up, guys. There we go. It's right here. So the Navi 48, 3,584 cores, 96 ROPS, 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 on a 256-bit bus. So yeah, this is actually going to be very impressive because this thing, if the RT is 45% better and it uses less, it's way less power than the XTX, and it's almost as fast as the XTX, and it's going to be cheaper than the XTX. Yeah, man. See, honestly, I actually prefer what AMD and Intel are doing in the GPU space than Nvidia. Now, obviously, okay, Nvidia is leading the pack with the super, super high-end GPUs, but the reality is Nvidia is only good if you're buying the super, super high-end. Buying the middle or the low-end Nvidia is basically like not the best choice. You're not getting the best value. You're basically getting gimped on a lot of things. So, and they like to lock out their old cards for their newer features. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't do Nvidia mid-range or low-end because it just doesn't seem like it's a good choice. You're getting so much better value for money with going with Radeon or Intel Arc. So for like entry level, it does seem to me like right now, at least in the next few months, Intel is going to be the best choice for the low end entry level with the 580 and the 570. And then AMD's probably going to be the best choice, like the best all-rounder. I have a feeling this card is going to kind of be like the successor to the 7900 GRE in terms of like the best value for money. It's going to be priced in a similar range as the GRE, and it's going to offer significantly better RT performance. It's going to use less power than the previous generation, and it's going to, it's giving you 4080 performance for like half the price of the 4080, essentially. So to me, this is probably going to be I can see this one winning like best overall GPU of 2025. Just on paper, it sounds like it's going to be the best deal. Like, the money goes the farthest with this card versus like anything else. So dollar per frame or whatever that metric is that they always talk about in reviews. I mean, this one seems like it's going to be a really smart choice. Yeah, and that's mainly because those other two cards are going to be stupid. Well, the 5080 is going to be, I don't know. Well, that one's kind of a mystery to me because I don't really know what exactly Nvidia can do with such a cut down like 256-bit bus. Like, how are they going to get the massive uplift versus the previous generation? So it's all going to be like architectural improvements and stuff. So I don't really know what they're going to do there. And then the 5090 is just so far out there. Like, it's basically a supercar. But most people buy Honda Civics and like Camry, like you know what I'm talking about? Like everyday drivers, commuter cars. This is going to be like a fast commuter car. You know, like this is the sort of thing that people actually spend money on, not some like exotic, you know, supercar or whatever. It's cool to look at, but it's like, really? Are you really going to spend that kind of money? See, that's the sort of thing that I think is probably going to happen with the Nvidia stuff. And I think the Nvidia, honestly, they don't really care because it's like they know that people are going to buy their cards regardless, especially the mid range. Like we don't even need to say anything about the 5070 and the 5060, and we already know that they're going to sell a ton of those. Regardless of how they're reviewed, they're still going to end up in laptops. They're going to end up in pre-builds. So it doesn't matter. It's the same story. All the reviewers said that the 4060 was complete garbage. And you know what? 4060 still outsells like everything else. It's still the best seller. So, and it's because OEMs buy it up in bulk and they put it in pre-builds and they put it in laptops. And so that's what people end up getting regardless of what people say. So it's the same thing. History's going to repeat itself with the, with the next generation. It's just going to repeat itself over and over again. RX 8800 XT equals Toyota Camry SE. Yeah, exactly. It's like that kind of thing. That's a good example. That's a good analogy. So, yeah, I mean, especially with this AI stuff, you know, and there's a bunch of like the crypto company, like the crypto organizations, we'll call them, the people who are doing like crypto mining on a medium to large scale. A lot of these companies have shifted to offering AI as a service or hosting the actual GPUs in their what used to be a mining database, but now it is an AI database. So these same people who did like crypto mining, you can expect they're going to be the ones that are going to be looking at these newer cards and seeing if there's an ROI, there's a business opportunity to buy these up in bulk. So it's a cheaper alternative compared to spending money on something like this, for example. This is a 4090 Ti. This is the Titan, so to speak, of the RTX 40 series. You know how much this costs? $6,800. Yes, almost $7,000 for a 4090 Ti. 48 gigabytes of VRAM, 384-bit bus, and 609 millimeters squared. So when people are like, oh, Nvidia can't charge, $3,000, $2,500, that's way too much money. Those people need a reality check because they clearly don't understand the full market. They don't understand the market that Nvidia exists in, and they have no idea like that these other products exist and sell at these ridiculously high prices, and businesses and companies spend money on this stuff in bulk, and everyone's fine with it. So it's business as usual. Nvidia knows what they're doing. There's talks of the Titan returning in the summer. See, I don't understand. Okay, I guess the 5090 is a cut down because I think the full die was like 24,000, whatever. Yeah, that full die would be a Titan. The full die would probably not come out as a Titan. It'll just come out as the professional card, this thing, and it'll have like 64 gigs of memory, and it'll be like $7,500. That's most likely what they'll do. So, blower style cooler, and it might even be like a triple slot or something. Probably not a triple slot because it has to fit in a server, so it needs to be a 2 slot for compatibility. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll see more. I mean, was there anything else on here? And we already talked about this. We talked about this. SKU services online. No mention of this. Okay, so we kind of already know, like the ROCm update on GitHub basically leaked the existence of this. So that's probably what it's going to be called. at this point. Nvidia stuff, we talked about that. Oh, AMD's first B850 motherboard images surface online. Oh. Oh, okay. So there's an Aorus. It's a white motherboard, and it's an MATX. So that's interesting. So for those of you that are looking for a lower cost AM5 option in white for a small form factor build, it looks like next year you'll have some more options. So that's cool. So that's coming next year, probably Q1, and then Asus confirms X870 BTF motherboards are going to launch alongside the Ryzen 9000 X3D at CES. So they're doing the BTF. So this looks like this is a that's actually an Intel board. But they're doing, they confirmed the X870 is going to get a BTF. So that's cool. Yeah, that's okay. That is an Intel board. Just saying. So those pictures are all Intel boards. But that's cool. So BTF is a thing. The MSI Godlike is kind of like a BTF motherboard, except instead of the connectors being on the back, they're right angled. So it is nice to see that that is coming for the Ryzen 9 X3D. So like a 9950 X3D and maybe a 9900 X3D. The ROI for them is scalping. What? The ROI for them is scalping? Who? Nvidia locks the floating point performance on the consumer GeForce. Titans and Quadros have no restriction. Yeah, that's why the Titan was kind of a good deal back in the day. And people were wondering, like, why is it $2,500? Well, it's because... But the thing is, Nvidia got rid of that Titan and they went Quadro for the super, super high expensive price of like $6,000, $7,000. The BTF will probably be like 600, 700. I don't know, like 500 to 700. It'll be like in the same range of the Dash E and the Hero, somewhere in there if I had to guess. So should we wait for the 8800 XT or buy the XTX now? That is a decision that you have to make. Realistically, you don't have to wait that much longer to hear about it. It's what, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 4 weeks from now is the announcement. So if you can wait throughout the holiday season, then I would just wait. Like we said last week, the thing to upgrade now in the holiday season is the motherboard, the RAM, the CPU, all that stuff. The case, the power supply. Basically, what you take advantage of the holiday sales on things like power supplies, motherboards, RAM, maybe SSDs. Those are the sort of things that you should buy during the holiday. And then next year, when the new graphics cards come out, then you're in a better position to choose a better, newer graphics card. Although XTX right now is a really good deal, though. So yeah, if you want to take advantage of the holiday season sales, and you don't need to buy a new CPU, you don't need to buy other things, unless you're doing a full new build. Right now, there's some really good deals on the GPUs, on the older GPUs. Around the same price Intel BTF, that's what I was saying. So around, like, yeah, I said 600 to 700 is the range. So 600 is right in the middle of that. GRE is also a good buy around that, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, there's pretty good deals right now. And those GPUs are already probably not going to be manufactured next year. So there's new stuff inbound. But all right, guys, that's pretty much all I had. So that is probably it. This definitely was a shorter stream, but I think we didn't really have a whole lot to cover except the new GPUs. So we have like Nvidia will launch their new flagship stuff next year. And then, well, you know, it'll probably all this stuff is going to get announced at CES for AMD and Nvidia. I'm actually curious to know like what AMD does with the APU stuff for desktop, because I want to see them do like Strix Point on desktop. I want to see how that plays out. 9950X3 is most likely going to get announced at CES. Do you plan on talking OLED? Many PC owners are getting there. We already discussed OLED a few months ago. OLED will also be talked about at CES. So the new panels for OLED are coming next year. If you're trying to get higher resolution, higher refresh, smaller physical panel size, those are coming next year. Currently, the best options for OLED are going to be either those high refresh 1440p, although I don't really recommend them for anything outside of gaming because 1440p on an OLED does not look very good for reading. For text clarity, it's not very clear. But 4K 32-inch is a very good choice for basically everything. 240 hertz. You can either go with the matte screen from LG with a WOLED, or you can go with the Samsung QD OLED. So that's the quantum dot OLED. So that's kind of like a new, like slightly brighter. But yeah, that's going to be a glossy one. So there's a lot of options for OLED, especially for 4K. So if you are somebody who is thinking of getting into like 4K, I think right now there's a lot of good 32-inch OLEDs. If you want like a 27-inch form factor, that is next year. So that is definitely going to be next year. I don't know what the refresh rates are going to be. Probably 240 hertz. Same thing as last time. But PG27 UCDM. Yeah, there's the UCDM and there's the UCDP. UCDM is the QD OLED. UCDP is the WOLED. Oh, you said 27. Yeah, well, I mean, same thing. Same thing. I was thinking PG32. PG32 is the 4K. PG27 is the 1440. Because it's the 27-inch. You have a 144 hertz 55-inch 4K OLED. And text is not looking good. That's because it's too large. It's too large. That's what I was saying earlier. So like 32-inch 4K OLED looks really good. There's no problem with text clarity at that smaller size with that crispy pixel density. But anything like I don't like 27-inch OLED 1440. It's too blurry on text. The large TVs are also going to be kind of blurry. If you sit too close to it, it's going to look blurry on the words because of the non-standard pixel arrangement that OLEDs have. Alienware 27-inch 360 hertz QD OLED. Yeah. How is text clarity on that? 4K. You want 4K 27-inch? 4K 27-inch? Yeah, that's what I'm wanting to see for next year. So I like 27-inch I like 27-inch 4K. My first 4K monitor, the one that I'm reading the chat right now on a 27-inch 4K at 100% scaling. So the text is extremely crisp, but this is not a OLED. This is a IPS panel from Sony. You're using Aorus 27-inch 2K OLED, and the text hurts your eyes. Low key. Yeah. Well, wait. Oh yeah. Yeah. See, that's why I can't do 27-inch at 1440 on an OLED. I don't like it. It has to be. It just has to be. So if I was gonna do 27-inch 1440, it would have to be like mini LED or something. I just don't. I don't know. Like I literally have like 3 different displays right in front of me. So I've got a 27-inch 4K that I'm reading the chat right now, and then over there, you guys can't see it, but there is a 32-inch 4K OLED the LG Ultra Gear. That one is with the 9800X3D gaming computer. And that is like end game gaming experience right there. You got 9800X3D, and you get that 32-inch 4K OLED 240 hertz. So, man, it looks good. Let me see. Is there even like an LG Ultra Gear 32-inch? There it is. This is it. This is the OLED monitor that I have on the 9800X3 gaming computer. LG Ultra Gear. This panel is also featured in the Asus ROG PG32 UCDP. Exact same panel. It can do 4K 240 hertz or 1080p 480 hertz. So this one might actually be on sale right now for the holiday. But yeah, this one is really good. So the Asus one is probably giving you more value for the money, more features. But the difference between the LG and the Asus, if you're someone who likes a standard, if you're going to use the monitor stand instead of a monitor arm, the LG one, I like that it's flat, so you can actually set things underneath it. The Asus one has these big, giant, like, legs that it's more style over function, whereas I think the LG one is definitely more function over style or function over form or whatever. So this was more practical. The other thing that I like about the LG Ultra Gear versus the Asus, this one has better built-in speakers. So if you use gaming headsets or headphones all the time, that's probably not going to matter too much. But the built-in speakers on this rival that of like a decent TV. Not like a really big TV or anything, because it's only 32 inches. But this has really nice built-in speakers for a computer monitor. So, and they can get away with that because it's a 32-inch panel. But yeah, this is probably the best monitor that I have ever used. It is so good. It is the motion clarity of OLED. This is my only OLED panel. So my first and only OLED is a 4K 240 hertz. And let me tell you, this thing at 32 inches has no issues with text clarity because the density of 4K is so good that it overpowers any sort of drawback that you would get from the non-standard pixel arrangement that OLED has. So man, this thing, although I would highly recommend, if you're interested in 4K OLEDs, definitely go to a Best Buy. Definitely go and see it in person. I would never spend this kind of money on a monitor unless I actually got to test it in person first, or at least see it up close before actually spending the money on this. It's like, yeah, you can return if you don't like it, but it's like, do you really want to deal with a return if you don't like it versus actually doing your homework and realizing you like the thing and then getting it? So, I mean, that's just how I roll, but you know, you guys can do whatever. But anyway, this monitor has been flawless. It is so good. I don't know, man. It's tough. Once you go OLED, it is very hard to switch to anything else. It just feels so endgame in terms of the motion clarity, the response time, the black levels, the color gamut, the refresh rate, the pixel density, like the whole package. The whole package. It's so much better than anything else. I don't know, man. I just cannot see myself going back to any other type of display. Yeah, that's a good point. Best Buy, if you Total Tech, you have 60 days. Yep. That's definitely a good way to do an extended test drive of the product. But yeah, it's very impressive. Let me tell you, OLED, I took a long time. It took me a long time of back and forth vacillating on whether or not I would go with an OLED. And then finally, I was like, okay, I'm going to go see this thing. I looked at it in the Best Buy. It was like, oh man, this is super nice. The color spectrum, the color gamut, the contrast ratio, the black levels, the pixel response, the readability of 4K OLED versus like 1440 OLED. It's just the whole package, man. And the nice built-in speakers on the Ultra Gear. Now, the Asus one is probably going to be better value overall. You get more features on Asus versus the LG Ultra Gear. But, I don't know. The Ultra Gear, it's good. I like having a flat monitor stand because I can easily stack things underneath this versus the Asus one, which is like, you'll see. If you look at the Asus one, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you upgrade your OLED firmware? I have actually not updated the firmware at all on mine. Actually, did I? I may have done. Yeah, I think I did it once. Like when I first bought it, I think I did update the firmware one time. But ever since then, I haven't updated the firmware. I don't know. I haven't really bothered to check. I mean, it works with no problems. So it's like, I'm the type of person, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm not really going to mess around with it too much unless there's like a noticeable known thing that, hey, you need to update the firmware because there's some whatever. Like, otherwise, I'm not really going to mess with it. But yeah, this... Once you go OLED, it's really, really hard to go back to anything else. It is tough. This thing is nice. It is so dense. So good. This 4K resolution. Like I was saying earlier, like it's not just OLED. It's OLED plus 4K. "100% OLED is king." Yeah. Alright, guys. Well, I think that's pretty much it. Like I said before, if you're building a PC or you're doing upgrades this holiday season, the things you probably want to spend money on are going to be an OLED monitor or the computer parts, everything except the graphics card, really. The only problem is if you get a 4K OLED and you're on a GPU that can't handle 4K gaming, then you're really going to have the pressure of wanting to upgrade your graphics card next year. So, that's going to be it for next week. There is going to be no Tech Thursdays. So I will be in Japan next week. So all throughout next week and then also the following week. So I don't know exactly how, like, obviously next week there's no Tech Thursdays. So if you're somebody who takes time, you schedule to watch the live streams, I appreciate that. But just know for next week there is no show next week. And then I don't know if the following week, like if the 19th there'll be a Tech Thursdays or not. We'll see. But definitely for next week there won't be any live stream. I'm going to try to do some YouTube shorts. I'll try to upload YouTube shorts while I'm in Japan. But that's most likely what will be happening for the next week and maybe like a week and a half. Otherwise, that's going to be it. I may do one final stream this weekend, but probably not. Don't count on it because I'm probably going to have to be getting ready for the trip. So, yeah. The last time I was there was 2018, so it's been a long time. It's been like 6 years. Alright guys, that's going to be it for the stream. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, do like the stream. It does help me out. This is a relatively small channel. I am trying to grow the channel. So if you like this sort of open form, long form discussion, do like the video. Do get subscribed. Sometimes I go live, and if you want to be notified of when I go live, do hit the notification bell icon on the stream. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will see you guys probably in two and a half weeks. Something like that. Until then, take care, and I'll see you then. Thanks.